My parents announced they were giving my sister the house. Everyone clapped. I asked, should I read the foreclosure notice dated October 31st? The room froze. My parents were always picking favorites, and my sister was the chosen one. I created my own life, maintained my distance, and attempted to stay out of their mess. But when Thanksgiving rolled around, they decided to make it my problem. Anyway, before I get into what happened at that table, let me start with the beginning. I'm Ethan, a 30-year-old environmental compliance inspector who has worked on major construction projects. I now lived in Chicago and kept my head down and my family at arm's length because my parents were notorious for favoritism growing up. But this Thanksgiving, they did something so out of the ordinary that I'm still processing it. Okay, here we go. 4 weeks before Thanksgiving, Mom called me at work. I was in the process of reviewing soil samples from a highway expansion project in Aurora. I got dirt under my nails and a headache from wearing a dust mask all morning. Environmental compliance inspector didn't sound glamorous until you realized I was the guy who could halt a $25 million project with just one signature. Honey, she started. And I already knew it was going to be bad. She only used the honey voice when she needed something or wanted me to remain silent about something. What is up, Mom? I just want to make sure you're still coming to Thanksgiving and that you'll be nice. I paused and set down the sample bag. What is there to be nice about? Your sister has great news to share. We're all extremely excited for her. I just don't want you to make it about yourself or start anything. There it was. I was the problem before I even walked through the door. I hadn't planned to start anything. Good. Because this is an important moment for Claire and the entire family. We want things to be perfect. Claire, my younger sister, was 27 years old and still lived at home in Neatville. She worked as a receptionist at a dental clinic, earning around $41,000 per year. She drove the car her father bought her. Used Mom's paid-off credit card. She'd never paid rent in her entire life. I will be there, I said. And you'll be glad for her. Sure, Mom. She did not believe me. I could hear it in her silence. But she let it go because she had no choice. I hung up and stared at the phone. This pattern has persisted for 30 years. Claire was praised for showing up. I was interrogated for simply existing. When I was 24 and drowning in student loans, I asked Dad for $6,000. He said no. They said I needed to learn the value of hard work. Claire decided to travel to Europe 18 months later. $9,500 for 4 weeks. Dad paid for the entire thing. If I didn't make a joke, I would shake. My boss, Mitchell, poked his head into my office. Guy was 58. I had been doing this work for 30 years. I've seen every type of family drama there was. You appear to have just received bad news. Things related to the family. He nodded. I didn't press the issue. That is why I liked him. Are you going home for the holidays? Yeah. We need to talk about it. Nah, I'm fine. He looked at me for a second. You're one of the most composed individuals I've ever worked with. Whatever it is, you will handle it correctly. I appreciated it more than he realized. That night I returned to my Lakeview apartment and went through my files. Not work files, but the other one. I've been building them since September. It began with a phone call. Dad. It is September 23rd, 10:15 a.m. I was on site near Joliet, about to crawl under a house to check the foundation drains. Son, I need to speak with you about something important. My stomach sank. Somebody died. Someone is sick. Something is wrong. We need help. Financial assistance. It's Mom. She underwent surgery back in June. Insurance did not cover everything. We're looking at around $24,500 in medical bills. I did not hesitate. I can help. How much do you need? Is that all? $24,500. Could you wire it this week? Something felt off. Mom underwent surgery in June. It was September. Why wait 2 months to ask? I pushed it down. They were my parents. Let me call the hospital. I'll arrange a payment plan directly with them. Silence. The silence was long. We'd prefer cash. We will handle the hospital. That's when I knew. Dad. If there are medical bills, I will pay the hospital, not you. His voice changed. Became defensive. We don't need you to question us. We need assistance. Then allow me to assist properly. Which hospital? He hung up. I sat in my truck for 12 minutes. Then I made a few calls. The 4 major hospitals in the area inquired whether there were any outstanding balances in my parents' names that matched what Dad claimed. Nothing. There are no $24,500 bills in collection or waiting to be paid. So I dug deeper and obtained property records for their house. It cost me $75. Second mortgage, $98,000. 5 months overdue. First mortgage, $59,000 balance. 3 months late. My throat tightened and my hands shook as I sat in my truck, staring at the printout. My father lied about mom's surgery. Lied to get money. He lied because he knew if I found out the truth, I would break the record. I took everything I could legally get my hands on. Obtained loan documents from the county recorder. Marina's record. Dad purchased a 36-foot cabin cruiser. $85,000. A boat. He risked his house for a boat. Claire made a big announcement at Thanksgiving 3 weeks later, using house emojis in her post. They were going to capture her. I started making copies of everything. I have been carrying it ever since. I was on the road by 8 o'clock on Thanksgiving morning. On holidays, traffic out of the city was a mess. It could be 45 minutes or 100. The family group chat lit up. Claire can't wait for everyone to arrive. Today is going to be very special, Mom. Ethan, what time will you be here? Approximately 2. Perfect. Claire's announcement is at 2:30. A performance has been scheduled and choreographed. I arrived in their driveway at 1:58. Aunt Laura's Mercedes was already present. Uncle Mark's pickup. My cousin Emily's Honda. Ryan's parents parked their SUV near the curb. His mother was already inside helping her with appetizers. At least 17 cars in total. The folder was on the passenger seat. I grabbed it, locked the truck and walked up the front steps. Claire opened the door before I knocked. She was dressed in a white sweater dress, her hair was curled and her makeup was flawless. She appeared to be going to a cocktail party rather than a family dinner. You made it, she stated. Not warm, but observational. Traffic was light, so she stepped aside and didn't hug me. We stopped doing this years ago. The house was full. People are everywhere. There's a football game on television. Children running around. That green bean casserole on the counter, which everyone pretended to enjoy. Dad was in the living room with Claire's boyfriend, Ryan. Ryan sold insurance, made around $60,000 per year, drove a leased BMW he couldn't afford, and wore cologne that smelled like a high school locker room. Ethan. Dad got up, came over and did the hug back slap thing. Good to see you, son. His eyes were on mine, trying to figure out if I was going to be a problem. I smiled and gave him nothing. Grandma was in the corner chair, 86 years old and sharper than anyone else in the room. She watched me walk in and gave me a slight nod. She knew something was coming. I could see it on her face. I found a spot at the dining room table, placed the folder on the floor next to my chair, sat down, and waited. People slowly filed in, taking seats and making small talk. Someone asked about the game. Someone else was complaining about gasoline prices. Aunt Laura was discussing her book club drama. Uncle Mark was explaining his new truck's towing capacity to anyone who would listen. Claire sat at the head of the table, the place of honor. Mom's position was to her right. Dad stood to her left. Ryan stands next to Dad, looking nervous. There was another person at the table I didn't recognize. An older woman with a professional appearance. A briefcase sits next to her chair. Who is that? I asked Emily quietly. No idea. She arrived right before you. I was across from Claire. Direct line of sight. She caught my eye and smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. It was a winning smile. Dad stood up and tapped his fork against the wine glass. Chairs squeaked as people moved. Before we eat, I'd like to say a few words about family, gratitude and the blessings we've received this year. Standard speech, which is the same every year with minor variations. We are especially grateful to have everyone here today. And we've got some very exciting news to share. He looked at Claire. She stood up. Ryan stood next to her, but she was the real star here. The entire room was watching. Some people had already taken their phones out. Recording. Waiting for the right moment. Waiting for Ryan's mother smiled too much as if she was trying to be supportive on camera. Claire began speaking, her voice shaking slightly. It's difficult to say whether I'm excited or nervous. Mom and Dad are giving us their house. We'll take over the existing loans, which Dad says are in excellent condition, and begin building equity. No more renting. The room erupted in applause and cheers. Someone whistled. Aunt Laura was crying. My cousins were all smiling and raising their glasses as Uncle Mark shouted, "Congratulations. We will handle everything." Claire's voice grew louder over the noise. The payments, the upkeep, and the fact that we are actually building something. More cheering, more phones emerging. Forks were stopped halfway to the mouth. Dad stood up, raising his hand. And, because the lender requires signatures to complete the transfer and new loan terms, we've hired a mobile closing agent. We're going to handle the paperwork right here and now. The woman at the end of the table stood up, opened her briefcase, and took out a stack of papers. This is Patricia, Dad explained. She does after-hours mobile signings. She is here to oversee the signing and notarization of the documents. Claire, sweetheart, come down here so we can get started. Claire was glowing. She stood up and began walking to the end of the table, where the closing agent was setting up papers. Ryan was filming with his phone. This is amazing. This is actually happening. My chest tightened. My jaw didn't stop twitching. This was it. They were going to do it right here and now. Claire then looked at me directly. The room was still noisy, but she remained focused. Unlike some people who leave and only return home twice a year, I have always been here. I help with the yard. I run errands. I show up. And I believe action should be rewarded. Someone laughed, then immediately regretted it. People were looking at me, waiting for my response. My cousin Emily leaned in toward her boyfriend and whispered something. He looked at me and smiled. Uncle Mark raised his glass to the daughter who remained. To Claire. To whom? Claire. The room echoed. Aunt Laura set down her wine glass and gave me a pitying expression. You are not upset. I mean, your sister will receive the entire inheritance. Should I be? I asked. She gave Claire a glance. I just think some people might be hurt. He's fine, Claire said with a sharp voice. He doesn't need anything from us. He has a big Chicago life. Our cousin Tyler spoke up from the corner. That's cold, dude. You drove for nearly an hour to watch your sister get everything. Tyler, do not start. Someone said. What? I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. Guy moves away, barely visits, and now he's supposed to smile while she gets the house. I took a sip of water, carefully placed the glass down and said nothing. Uncle Mark leaned back in his chair. Chicago made you cold, Ethan. You used to be part of this family. I am a member of this family. Are you in? Claire cut in. Because you think you're better than the rest of us. As if your current situation is insufficient. Someone's younger cousin, maybe 16, leaned across the table holding his phone. I pushed it close to my face. Get his reaction. This is gold. I did not move. Didn't blink. I looked straight at the camera. Make sure you understand my positive side. It's the only one that appears here. Uncle Mark laughed. Sharp. Mean. Look at him. Ice cold. Nothing bothers the big city guy. A younger cousin spoke up. Could we just eat? This is awkward. It's not awkward, Claire explained. Ethan is simply being Ethan, Mom said quickly. Ethan understands. He has always been the strong one. Aunt Laura looked at me strangely now. But, Robert, this seems like a lot to give to a single child. Claire earned it, Dad insisted firmly. She stayed. Ethan made his decisions. Claire demanded that they say congratulations. Like you mean it. Do not just sit there judging us. A phone kept recording, with a small red dot glowing. Smile, Ethan, Mom said. Sweet voice with steel underneath. Claire remained standing, papers in the closing agent's hand, pen ready. I set down my glass. That's very generous. Congratulations. Claire blinked. Smile as if you mean it. I am smiling. This is simply my expression as I watch a train crash into a wall. Aunt Laura touched my arm. Are you really okay with this? Should I be upset? I mean, it's also your family home. Claire snapped. He left it. You do not have the right to leave and complain when someone else takes what you left behind. Tyler grumbled. That's harsh. It's true. He's too good for Neepville, too good for family dinners, too good for Sunday visits. Actions have consequences. I didn't leave. I received the reward. The closing agent cleared her throat. To be clear, these signature lines establish you as new borrowers on the loans. If we're going to do this, let's get started. Dad nodded and gestured toward Claire. Claire took a step towards the closing agent. I looked at Dad. He was pale with white knuckles and a firm grip on his chair. Hey Dad, I said. We can do this privately. Walk with me. He was frozen. No. Claire replied immediately. We're doing this right in front of everyone. You don't get to take him aside and poison it. Mom's face became tight. Ethan, please don't ruin this. I offered to not ruin it privately. There's nothing to discuss, Dad said. The voice shook. Claire walked back toward the closing agent. Simply ignore him. He's trying to make this about himself, as he always does. Last chance, I said quietly. For what? Claire snapped. So what could you possibly say? I reached down and picked up the folder. Okay. Then let's do it here. Dad's face was drained. Every drop of color is gone. Mom's hand began shaking so violently that she had to put down her wine glass. Ethan, Dad said. His voice seemed strangled. Not now. Not now? I opened the folder. When would be better? After she signs. What signs? Ryan asked. I pulled out the first document. Foreclosure notice. Large red letters. The case number is printed at the top. Placed it in the center of the table, directly on the turkey platter. The notice of default, I stated. Filed on October 31st. There have been 5 months of missed payments on the second mortgage. 3 months for the first. Claire stared at the document. What's that? I took out another page. The actual foreclosure filing. Timeline amounts. To avoid foreclosure, the bank requests a reinstatement payment of $29,000 by mid-December. Following that, the combined monthly payment is approximately $3,100. That is before utilities, property taxes, insurance, and repairs. That is not true, Mom started. Call the bank. Ask what is required to reinstate the loan at this address, or look up the foreclosure filing. The case number is right at the top. This is a public record. Nobody moved. The closing agent was packing her briefcase. Stood up. I cannot proceed while the parties are arguing the terms and there is visible coercion. If you want to proceed, reschedule with the lender. She walked out quickly. I looked around the table at everyone's faces. The phone is recording. So here's my question. Do you want the truth or a performance? Someone's phone kept recording. The little red dot is glowing. I can walk out, let you sign, and let you know when the reinstatement deadline arrives, but you can't come up with $29,000, or I'll tell you now. Claire was moving toward me. You're lying because you can't stand how happy I am. She was standing over me and pointing. Her voice was loud and she slammed her hand on the table. Silverware jumped, knocking over a wine glass. Red wine splattered across the white tablecloth. Wine had bled into the corner of the paperwork. I took the folder back. Sit down, I said flatly, quietly. Something in my voice changed when she stopped talking. She remained standing but did not move closer. I took out more papers, including the recorded mortgage document, the tax lien notice, and my own text to Dad. You're not giving her the house free and clear, I said. You're only giving her debt, mortgage and escrow. Approximately $36,000 per year, not including what breaks. Not including what the county has already filed liens for. Aunt Laura picked up one of the papers. Read it with wide eyes. Robert, this is real. Where did you get this? Dad's voice. The county recorder's office, public records. $75. Ryan was backing away. Wait, Claire. You mentioned that the loans were current and manageable. You did not mention anything about default or reinstatement. They are current. Claire stammered, looking at Dad. Right? You mentioned that the loans were in great shape. You said we only needed to sign the transfer. Dad could not speak. Uncle Mark picked up the foreclosure notice. Make a hard face. This means they are months behind. Final notice. Mom whispered. That cannot be right. It is dated October 31st. Claire earns $41,000. I mentioned Ryan's salary of $60. The total take-home pay could be around $74. You would spend half of your income just to keep the house. There's nothing left for a wedding, savings, or emergencies. Emily's mouth was open. They planned to trick her. They were going to trap her, I explained. Ryan's face was red. You told me the house was in good condition. You stated that we would be building equity, not digging out a foreclosure. We thought we'd catch up, Dad said weakly. Based on what? I asked. What has changed? What made you suddenly believe you could handle debt that you had been defaulting on for months? Silence. Ryan was grabbing his coat. I'm out. I am done with this. Ryan, please wait. Claire chased him to the door, her heels clicking on the hardwood. Baby, please. We can figure it out. We can. The front door slammed. His parents followed him out and raised their voices in the driveway. She returned 40 seconds later, mascara running and lipstick smudged. You did it. You've ruined everything. I didn't ruin anything, I explained. I read it aloud. They needed help. You should have helped them. I tried. They refused. Ryan's parents walked back in. His mother's face was hard. He will not speak to us. He says he needs space. She turned to face Mom and Dad. Were you going to do this to our son? We assumed they'd figure it out, Mom said weakly. How do you calculate foreclosure and marital debt? Grandmother spoke for the first time. Her voice broke through the chaos. What exactly do you mean when you say they refused? Everyone stopped and looked at me. I pulled out my phone and opened the call log. On September 23rd, Dad called and told me that Mom had surgery, $24,500 in medical bills. They asked me to wire the money. I showed the screen to others nearby. Date, time, and duration of call. I immediately agreed. I said I'd call the hospital and arrange a payment plan. He said no. They wanted money. That's when I realized something was wrong. I looked at Mom. I called the hospitals. Asked if there were any outstanding balances in my parents' names that matched what Dad claimed. Nobody had bills like those. Nothing recent that fits. Mom's face wrinkled. That's when I pulled the property records, discovered the mortgages, missed payments, and foreclosure timeline. Claire said, "You should have given him the money anyway. What will you spend it on?" "Additional boat maintenance." Uncle Mark's head snapped upward. "Boat." I took out another document. Boat registration at the marina. 36-foot cabin cruiser. March, 2021. $85,000. The room became nuclear. Uncle Mark is standing. Aunt Laura yells. Emily shook her head. "You purchased a boat." Uncle Mark's voice was powerful enough to strip paint. "We thought we could afford it," Dad whispered. Grandma stood, the chair scraped. Everyone became quiet. "How long have you been hiding this?" Dad finally said it had been 18 months. "Instead of asking for help, you chose to lie to your children." "We were desperate," Mom protested. Emily admitted she was desperate enough to lie on loan documents. "If they misrepresented the transfer to the lender, that constitutes fraud." "You tried this on Ethan first, didn't you?" Aunt Laura inquired. I nodded. On May 11th I was asked to co-sign. They called it a refinance. Just a formality. "Have you signed?" Uncle Mark asked. "Almost." I told them I wanted my lawyer to review it first. I took out another document. I received an email from my lawyer. Subject: Don't sign. She told me that if I signed, I would be legally responsible for $155,000. That's when I began digging. Claire turned to me and pointed. "This is entirely your fault. I am not ruining anything. I'm reading it aloud. You were never the important one." She hissed with venom. "You were never good enough, and you can't accept that I finally won." The room became silent. That was the line. The one you do not return from. My hands clenched into fists beneath the table. "Hold it. Simply hold it." Emily's jaw dropped. Aunt Laura appeared horrified. I simply looked at her. Did not react. "Noted," I said quietly. The argument restarted, this time louder. Phones out, taking pictures. I stood up. Claire looked at me, her face a complete mess. "How long have you known?" "Since September." "Why haven't you told me?" "I tried 3 times. You were always with them. They made certain I couldn't get you alone. You could have tried harder." "I'm trying now." She laughed, breaking the glass. "By humiliating me and keeping you from signing away your life." I grabbed my coat. "You are welcome." Grandmother stood up. Her chair scraped. Everyone became quiet again. "Robert, please give me the boat keys." Dad blinked. "What?" "I am currently in possession of the boat keys. You are not paying slip fees for another month while my grandchildren are on the verge of debt. Now. Keys now. Or I'll call the marina and have it impounded." Dad fumbled in his pocket, pulled out a keychain and handed it to her. She pocketed it, then took out her phone and began dialing. "Who are you calling?" Mom asked, her voice small. "My lawyer. We are changing my estate plan tonight. Everything is split equally between Ethan and Claire. You won't get anything until you've proven you're trustworthy." She took the phone to her ear and walked into the other room. Uncle Mark spoke up. "That boat will be listed tomorrow. I know a guy who does marine sales. We will get whatever we can out of it." "You can't," Dad began. "Pay attention to me." I walked towards the door. Aunt Laura stopped me and placed a hand on my arm. "Most of us witnessed it. How they treated you differed from Claire. We didn't say anything. I apologize for that." I nodded. I didn't know what else to do with that information. "You did the right thing," she said quietly. "It doesn't feel like it. It never does." I walked out. I didn't look back. My phone lit up before I got to my truck. Emily sent a text. Aunt Laura called the cops. Thinks there may be elder abuse or fraud. This is going to get bigger. I sat there for 12 minutes, just breathing and looking at the house through the windshield. Then I started the car and headed back to Chicago. 3 weeks after Thanksgiving, I received a call from Detective Reynolds of DuPage County. We met in a coffee shop. She was in her mid-40s and worked professionally. I took notes in an actual notebook. Thank you for meeting. Not a problem. You are not in trouble. We are looking into your parents. There may be issues with loan misrepresentation. I walked her through everything. September call, timeline, and documents. She took notes and flipped through the pages, raising her eyebrows. Your parents claim you managed their finances and advised them on the property transfer. I pulled out my phone and showed her the texts. This is where he asked for money. I offered to pay the hospital. He refused. That is it. I never accessed their accounts. She took a photograph of the screen. So they appear to be shifting liability. Do you have evidence that you were not involved? 3 years of no contact with their bank. No joint accounts. No power of attorney. And my lawyer's documentation from when they attempted to get me to co-sign in May. She flipped back through the notes. Your sister mentioned that they pushed hard for a spring wedding. April, specifically. They scheduled the date before Ryan proposed. Mom chose the venue. April would have been 7 months after the property transfer, exactly when payments were due. If your sister and fiancé were married and lived there, they would expect his income to cover the costs without telling him what he was getting into. This is the fraud angle we're looking at. If the borrowers or lender falsified occupancy or intent, they would be making a misrepresentation to both parties. What do you need from me? If it goes to court, the testimony will be truthful, which is unlikely. Most of these settle. I will tell the truth. That is all I have been doing. She closed the notebook. You rescued your sister from years of financial ruin. Most people do not have anyone willing to blow up Thanksgiving to protect them. I just read the paperwork. She smiled at this. I will be in touch. Dad arrived at my office 4 days later. Mitchell summoned me in. Your father says there is a family emergency. Dad was there looking tiny. Dad said, we need to talk. Mitchell was studying the room. Take the day if you need it. I'm good. This will happen quickly. We went outside. The wind was cold. This needs to be fixed. The detective is taking documents. They're claiming fraud. That is not my problem. We are family. You do not do this to your family. You attempted to trap your daughter in debt she could not afford. What would you call that? We were desperate. Then you should have asked for assistance. Honestly, he grabbed my arm. You can make this go away. Tell them there was a misunderstanding. I looked at his hand on my arm and then back at his face. He let go. I am not lying for you. Whatever happens right now is what you earn. She's falling apart. Your sister is not eating, sleeping, or taking medication. Because she nearly signed away her life. Or because Ryan left. Both. Then she should thank me. Ethan. Please stop contacting my workplace. Stop showing up here. If you need anything, please text me. I'll decide whether to respond. I walked back inside. Mitchell was waiting. You okay? Yeah. Things related to the family. He nodded. You handled it well. By mid-December, the foreclosure was underway. Claire texted. I met with a therapist. She claims I was conditioned to accept manipulation. That I confused favoritism for love. It's better to figure it out now than never. Can we talk when you're ready? Christmas. I did not go home. Emily shared a photo from Grandma's. Small dinner. Caption. New tradition. You've been invited for next year. Grandma called that night. Claire is staying with me. Therapy is helping. Your parents declared bankruptcy. Tell her I'll be here when she's ready. February. Dad sent angry texts. I sent one back. Stop contacting my workplace. Further contact will be recorded as harassment. I then blocked his number. Mitchell informed me that I was up for promotion in April. Life moved forward. February 12th. Claire texted. Can we meet? Coffee. We met at Neepville. She got there first. Looked better and healthier. Hey. She said. Hey. There was awkward silence. I am sorry about Thanksgiving, for what I said, for believing them instead of you. You didn't know. I should have questioned it. I wanted the fantasy so bad. How are you today? Better to live with Grandma. Figuring out who I am beyond being Dad's favorite. She laughed. It turns out that being the favorite equals being the most useful. Noah, I've started seeing someone. He is a paramedic. I told him everything. He did not run. That is good. I miss having a brother. I'm still your brother. She began crying. I do not deserve that. Probably not, but you'll get it anyway. We talked for an hour about favoritism, patterns, and how I was expected to handle things while she received protection. They have been paying my car payment for a year. I didn't know that specifically, but it does track. I thought I deserved it. It turned out I was just easier to control. They were unable to control me. That's why they went after you. Do you despise them? No. But I don't trust them. And I don't owe them my destruction. Grandma is changing her will. We'll split everything equally between us. Dad receives nothing until he proves his trustworthiness. Good. We left. Stood in the parking lot. A cold February wind. May I hug you? Yeah. She hugged me tightly. Thank you for saving me, even if I despised you for it. You are welcome. Can we try this again? Yeah. Call me at any time. April brought the promotion. Mitchell summoned me in. Senior inspector receives 14% raise. You've earned it. Thanks. You've changed this year. More focused. It's obvious what you've been going through. Spring arrived. I was working on a project in Oak Park when my mother called. Ethan. Her voice was tiny. We need to talk about your father, and I've been in counseling. We'd like to apologize. I really apologize. Okay. Can we see you face to face? Why? We owe you that. Because we were wrong. I thought about it. I will think about it. Please. Your father looks different now. I will think about it. I hung up that night. I called Grandma. Mom wants to meet. They say they've been in counseling. Yes, they have. I have been paying for it. Condition of assisting them. Do you believe they have changed? A long pause. I believe they're scared. Not the same as changed. Should I meet with them? It's your decision. But if you do, make sure they earn it. Thank you, Grandma. I did not meet with them. Did not respond to Mom's texts. I maintained the boundary. May 22nd, 7 months following Thanksgiving. Claire sent a text. This weekend we're having family dinner at Grandma's. She wants everyone present, including you. Including them. Says it's time. I am not interested. Claire. I knew. But Grandma inquired. And she's 86. For her? I will think about it. 4 days later. I'll come. But I'll leave if things don't work out. Claire. Fair. Saturday afternoon. Grandmother's house. I was the last to arrive. I parked and sat down, wondering if it was worth it. Then I got out. Grandmother opened the door. You arrived. You asked. Thank you. She hugged me. Keep an open mind. But do not accept any garbage. I walked inside. The living room was set up like a mediation. Grandma's chair is at the head. Claire was sitting with Noah. Emily was next to her boyfriend. Uncle Mark and Aunt Laura sit on the other couch. And Mom and Dad on the love seat, looking smaller and older. Dad had lost weight. They looked up as I walked in. Dad began to stand. Sit down, Grandmother said. Not loud, but firm. He sat. I chose the chair farthest from them. Grandma sat next to Claire. We're here because this family is broken. Broken items are either repaired or thrown away. I'm too old to abandon my family, so we're fixing it. Nobody spoke. Robert, Susan, you have something to say. Say them. Dad cleared his throat with a shaky voice. Ethan, we owe you an apology. A real one. I waited. We tried to use you but you wouldn't let us. We attempted to use your sister. We transfer our problems to our children. That was incorrect. Mom cried. We were drowning. Debt, house and boat. Rather than asking for assistance, we attempted to manipulate you both. We've been in counseling for 7 months, Dad explained. Working out why. The stress, shame and fear of admitting failure. We filed for bankruptcy. Chapter 13. Everything is gone. We are starting over with nothing. And that is what we deserved. Mom added. You did not do this to us. We did it to ourselves. Silence. Grandma looked at me. Do you have anything to say? I took a breath. You did not just try to use me. You tried to destroy me, and when I refused, you moved on to Claire. You would have let her drown to avoid the consequences, Dad said, crying. You called my job. Showed up at my workplace. Tried to frame me as unstable. Made me the villain for telling the truth. I know, my dad admitted. So no. I do not accept your apology. Not yet. Mom's face wrinkled. What do we need to do? Prove it through your actions. Make amends. Create something real. How long? However long it takes. I do not owe you a timetable. Claire spoke up. They've tried. Therapy. Being open about favoritism, using me and treating you as expendable. That does not undo what they did. No. But it is a start. I looked at my parents. Really looked at them. They were broken. Not performing. Just broke. You wanted the image more than your children. Now you don't have either. So. What are you planning to do? Mom wiped her eyes. Whatever it takes. No matter how long. We simply want our children back. You cannot have us back the way we were. That is no longer viable. But perhaps you can try something new. Grandma spoke. I've altered my will. Everything is split evenly between Ethan and Claire. Nothing goes to Robert until he proves he is trustworthy. Dad did not argue, simply nodded. And if Ethan says he is leaving, no one follows him. Nobody argues. Nobody guilt trips him. Anyone who violates that has to answer to me. Dad spoke quietly. I stood up. I am leaving now. This was sufficient. Claire also stood. Can I walk you out? Yeah. We walked to the door and stepped out. The evening air was warm. Thank you for coming, she said. This is for Grandma, not them. I understand, but still. It mattered. Are you okay? Getting there. Noah has been good to me. Therapy is helping. I'm discovering who I am when I'm not performing. Good. Are we all right? We are getting there. She hugged me. I love you. Even though I despised you, I loved you. I love you too. I walked to my truck, got inside and sat for a minute. My phone vibrated. Dad sent a text. Thank you for listening. I know I do not deserve it. I'll spend the rest of my life regaining your trust if that's even possible. I read it. Did not respond. Put down the phone. Started the car. And drove home. 7 months ago, I blew up my family to save my sister. Today, I sat in a room filled with wreckage. The truth did not solve everything, but it cleared the way. I pulled into my parking spot and walked up to my apartment, which was a small one-bedroom, nothing fancy but mine. Inside, I poured a drink, sat on the couch, and my phone buzzed. Claire, Noah would like to meet you officially. Have dinner sometime. Yeah. Name the day. That tie will take place in Lincoln Park next Friday. It works for me. I put the phone down. Tomorrow I have a site inspection in Evanston. Following that, dinner with Claire and Noah. Nearly 2 years later, I was celebrating Grandma's 88th birthday. A small gathering. Claire and Noah, Emily with her boyfriend, Uncle Mark, and Aunt Laura. Claire seemed different now, sharper and more grounded. She moved out of Grandma's house in June, got her own apartment in Downers Grove, paid her own bills, and lived her own life. I told her, you look good. Feel good. Noah and I are talking about getting engaged. This time actual planning will take place, rather than following someone else's timeline. That is good. Dad reached out last week and asked if we could meet. What have you said? Perhaps someday when I'm ready. She stared at me. You're the same. We were not repaired, but we were not broken in the same way. Mom and Dad were staying in a rental in Plainfield. Dad worked in a hardware store. Mom did bookkeeping for a church. They were slowly rebuilding without the boat and without the lies. Grandma called us to the table. Cake time. My phone buzzed while we were singing. Unknown number. I ignored it. After cake I checked. Dad left a voicemail. Ethan, I just wanted to say happy birthday to your grandmother. I know we aren't invited. That is fair. I just wanted you to know that we are thinking about you both and the family. We are working on it. That is all. I hope you're doing well. I've saved it. I did not delete. Did not respond. Perhaps someday. Not today. I took my phone and walked back inside. Claire was laughing at something Noah had said. Grandma was cutting second slices for anyone who requested them. This is right here. This was sufficient. I took another slice of cake and sat down. Forward. Not backward. Only forward. My sister forced me to fund her wedding, then mocked me as pathetic. I cancelled every vendor. She stormed my house, screaming I'd ruined her life. Claudia, my younger sister, chose me as her maid of honor when she got engaged last year. But instead of wedding styles, she emailed me the pricing of her bridesmaid dresses. Instead of wedding themes, she texted me the cost of her dream venue, complete with cheerful emojis. She ignored every question I asked that wasn't, "Where do I swipe my card?" She read and signed every planning email with, "Thanks for handling the payment." The pattern began early when Claudia said she was too stressed out about the wedding to handle vendor contracts. So, naturally, I put everything in my name and paid the deposit because she was my sister. Then she insisted that I shed £10 to avoid ruining images as she ate the pricey cake samples I had paid for. At the dress fitting, she informed the seamstress that I looked like a cow in the maid of honor gown and forced me to spend more for a more expensive one to reduce my size. Then she tweeted on social media about her charity case maid of honor, as if I were some needy single loser she was doing a favor by including. Still, I assumed she was just overwhelmed. And since I could afford it, I decided there was nothing wrong with giving my sister her dream wedding. However, she eventually exposed her genuine motives. 4 weeks before the wedding, I traveled to her apartment for the final planning meeting, carrying all of the vendor contracts in my folder since I needed to make the final payments. I arrived early and was going to knock on her door when I overheard her on speakerphone with the other bridesmaids, and my heart fell. "Don't worry, I only made her maid of honor for the money. She'll probably ruin my wedding photos by being that ugly. Just looking at her pathetic face makes me sick. I'm dropping her as maid of honor soon, but she's so desperate for family approval that she won't even complain when I tell her." My hand literally froze on the doorknob. A few seconds later, after I'd regulated my breathing, I opened the door and Claudia's expression changed to one of artificial sweetness the moment she noticed me standing there. "Oh, hey. So I've been thinking, and you'd be more comfortable just attending as a regular guest, right? My wedding photos need a certain aesthetic. Hopefully you'll do just this one thing for your sister." I glanced at her perfectly contoured face and felt something inside me crack clean in half. "Of course I understand perfectly." I lied, telling her I needed to process the change, and walked directly to my car, leaving her smiling after me. If she didn't want me there, I wouldn't be there, nor would my money. The venue deposit was in my name. The photographer used my credit card, and the flowers, decorations and food all required my signature because she had been too busy to handle them. The cancellation policies all provided for full refunds if made 3 weeks or more before the event, and we had 4 weeks. And guess what? All of the contracts were already in my hand. That afternoon, I went home and sat at my kitchen table, the contracts laid out like a deck of cards. My hands shook as I contacted the venue first, but my voice remained firm as I stated that my family circumstances had changed and that I needed my deposit refunded immediately. The photographer, florist, decorator and caterer have all confirmed cancellations and reimbursements after I gave them 4 weeks' notice. With each call, I felt the weight of her words press against my chest, reminding myself why I was doing this. She had cheated me, depleted my bank account while telling everyone I was miserable, and intended to humiliate me at the wedding I had paid for. By the evening, I had regained hundreds of dollars and felt absolutely hollow. 3 days passed in silence as I awaited the inevitable detonation. When my phone rang with Claudia's number, I took a big breath and answered. "The venue says we don't have a booking." "What did you do?" "The wedding is in 4 weeks. Nothing is booked. No photographer, no flowers. Nothing." Her voice cracked with hysteria as reality dawned on her. I informed her that I was now a frequent guest and that guests should not have to pay, so I canceled everything. She exploded with sobbing and screaming about how I was a jealous monster who had ruined her life for nothing. Then she told me I was not invited to a wedding that was no longer scheduled. I began giggling, and she hung up. Our parents called, outraged. But when I emailed screenshots and explained what I'd overheard, their rage subsided into an uncomfortable silence. That's when my sister made the decision to go nuclear. She screamed "screw her wedding" and started walking right to where I was. I heard her car before I saw her, the familiar growl of her engine rushing down my neighborhood at double the speed limit. My fists grabbed the kitchen counter as I looked out the window. Claudia's white vehicle sped into my driveway, leaving tire marks on the concrete. She jumped out without even closing the door, holding her wedding planning binder in one hand and her phone in the other. The beating on my door began quickly, with full-fisted smashes that rocked the frame. I counted to 10, then 20, trying to control my breathing through the peephole. I could see her face distorted with wrath, mascara dripping down her cheekbones. I opened the door just as she lifted her fist for another attack on it. She stumbled forward and caught herself on the door frame. The binder dropped, spilling papers all over my porch. Wedding inspiration photographs, vendor lists, and fabric swatches were strewn in the wind. She rushed past me into my house without my permission, her shoes clicking on the hardwood floors. I followed her into the living room, where she swung around and jabbed her finger into my chest. Her voice moved quickly, spewing out phrases about deposits, contracts, and how I had ruined everything. I maintained a neutral attitude, allowing her to exhaust herself when she eventually paused for breath. I stepped into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. She followed, still shouting. I sipped gently, watching her move back and forth across my kitchen like a confined animal. Her neatly groomed hair was falling undone, with blonde strands sticking to her tear-stained cheeks. She grabbed my shoulders and shook me. I cautiously laid down my glass and removed her hands. She tried again, pushing me against the refrigerator. I sidestepped, and she stumbled into the counter. The fruit bowl wobbled but did not fall. Her phone vibrated. She grasped it and her face turned paler. I could guess what she was reading. Probably another vendor confirming the cancellation. She tossed her phone toward the wall. It bounced off and clattered to the ground. The screen fractured but still glowed. She lunged at my purse on the counter, spilling its contents everywhere. Lipstick rolled behind the stove, receipts flew to the ground, and my wallet landed near her feet. She grabbed it, eagerly pulling out my credit cards as if they had some magical solution to her problem. I carefully picked up each item and returned them to my purse as she waved my cards around. When I reached for them, she lifted them above her head like a child playing keep away. I moved into the living room and sat down, leaving her alone in my kitchen with my credit cards. She followed and threw the cards at me. They had dispersed across the coffee table. I took them one by one and checked them for damage before returning them to my wallet. She stared, her chest heaving with every breath. Her phone rang on the kitchen floor. She scrambled for it, almost tripping on her heels. I heard her respond, her voice changing to a phony softness. Probably our mother. The conversation was brief. When she returned to the living room, her face had taken on a calculating expression that I recognized all too well. She sat opposite from me, straightening off her skirt and tucking her hair behind her ears. The transition was remarkable, from wild-eyed wrath to composed manipulation in seconds. She bent forward, hands joined as if in prayer, and her voice became gentle and regretful. She discussed wedding stress, how she hadn't meant what she said, and how sisters should encourage one another. I observed her performance, noting how she kept looking at her phone, perhaps calculating how much time she had to save her wedding. When weeping did not help, she changed tactics. She reminded me of childhood memories, of promises we made as small girls to be each other's maid of honor. She even took out her phone and showed me old images of us playing dress-up in our mother's wedding attire. I stood and walked to the window, watching the neighbors' children play in their yard. She followed, still speaking. Her reflection in the glass revealed her increasing desperation. We both realized she was running out of tactics. The phone rang again. This time, it was her fiancé, Daniel. I could hear his perplexed voice through the speaker as she attempted to explain why their venue had called regarding the cancellation. She gave me a furious glare as she fabricated tales about a miscommunication and a technological glitch. After she hung up, the mask fell completely. She snatched a pillow off my couch and tossed it against the wall. Then another. I kept a safe distance from her while she had a tantrum. When she reached for my grandmother's vase, I moved forward and grabbed it from her, carefully placing it on a high shelf. She collapsed on my couch, sobbing profusely. This time she shed real tears, but not because she was sad, but because she was frustrated that her plots were failing. I sat in the armchair across from her, waiting for the storm to clear. Her phone buzzed with text messages, wedding guests inquiring about the site, her fiancé wanting answers, and our parents attempting to mediate. Each message seemed to stoke her rage more. She stood hastily, wobbling slightly on her heels. She marched inside my home office, and I followed. She yanked open drawers, perhaps looking for copies of the contracts. Claudia's actions makes me wonder if there is something more going on here. The way she transitions from wrath to manipulation to tears feels like she's going through every technique she knows. I leaned against the doorframe, watching her search through my files. Tax returns were scattered around the floor. Old birthday cards flew like butterflies. When she didn't find anything useful, she switched to my computer. She pushed past me to the desk and frantically clicked through my email. I reached over and quietly shut the laptop. She wanted to open it again, so I unplugged it and tucked it under my arm. Her face became an awful shade of red. She scooped everything off my desk, including pencils, paper clips, and a smashed coffee mug on the floor. I cautiously stepped across the porcelain shards and returned to the living room, laptop still safely under my arm. She followed, taking a different strategy. She brought out her checkbook and waved it at me. She promised to repay me every penny with interest. She even began writing a check, her hand shaking so much that the numbers were hardly discernible. I didn't reach for the check when she held it out. It fluttered to the ground between us. She wrote another, this time for twice the amount. That one joined the first on the ground. By the fifth check, she was crying again, mascara running down her cheeks. Daniel, her fiancé, arrived and pounded on my door with the same vehemence Claudia had displayed before. I saw his car parked crookedly behind Claudia's, with one wheel on my yard. Claudia dashed to let him in before I could react. He stormed in, still wearing his work clothes, his face flushed with rage. He stared between us, attempting to grasp the situation. Claudia immediately went into victim mode, clinging to his arm and screaming about how I ruined their wedding out of jealousy. I stayed seated, letting her tell her story. When she finished, breathless and in tears, he looked to me for my interpretation. I just inquired whether he understood why Claudia had appointed me maid of honor. His puzzled expression spoke it all. Claudia tightened her grip on his arm. She tried to guide him toward the door, talking about the need to locate new vendors and how they could still save everything if they acted quickly. He refused, staring at me with rising distrust. I took out my phone and showed him my bank statements, including the thousands I'd spent on deposits and preparation. His eyes opened at the figures. Claudia reached for my phone, but he held her back, questioning why her sister had paid for everything. The gaps in her story grew wider. She stuttered about shared accounts and incomprehensible payment schedules. He demanded to view her bank statements. She claimed her phone was dead, despite the fact that we had all heard it ring only minutes before. He sat firmly on my couch, his head in his hands. Claudia crouched beside him, massaging his back and giving me angry looks over his shoulder. I excused myself to clean up the broken cup in my office, allowing them to converse. I could hear their voices in the other room, his getting louder with each query, and hers getting shriller with each fib. When I returned with a dustpan full of porcelain pieces, he was standing by the door, holding the car keys. He apologized to me before departing, his displeasure visible in every line on his face. Claudia dashed after him, her heels clicking wildly on my driveway. I observed from the window as they argued beside his car, her motions becoming increasingly urgent as he backed away from her contact. He drove away, leaving her standing in my driveway. She returned to the house, her face a mask of absolute fury. Before she could get to the door, I locked it. She pounded again, yelling threats about litigation, police, and family loyalty. I drew the blinds and began cleaning up the mess she had left in my living room. Outside, her cries dwindled into whimpers, then silence. When I looked out an hour later, her automobile had vanished, but the tire prints remained on my driveway like scars. My phone was buzzing with text from family members, everyone taking sides or demanding explanations. I switched it off and ate dinner alone at my kitchen table, where I had just set out those contracts and made the most difficult decision of my life. As night fell, I double-checked all of my locks and windows. I knew it was not over. Claudia had lost her wedding, potentially her fiancé, and certainly her influence over me. Tomorrow would bring more conflicts, manipulations, and attempts to break me down. But tonight, in my quiet house, with her pandemonium finally gone, I felt something I had not felt in months. Peace. The type that comes from sticking up for yourself, even if it means witnessing your sister's actual character in all of its hideous brilliance. I poured myself a cup of tea and sat in my armchair, where I'd watched her rant from. Tomorrow would bring its own issues. But tonight I was free. The morning brought exactly what I was expecting. My doorbell rang at 7 o'clock, and I looked through the peephole to see my mother, Anna, standing there with her arms crossed. Behind her, my father, Peter, shifted his weight from foot to foot, evidently uneasy. I opened the door and stood aside to allow them enter. My mother marched straight into the living room and perched on the edge of the couch, clutching her handbag in her lap. My father followed more slowly, his gaze drawn to the strewn wedding images that remained on my floor after Claudia's fury. He bent to pick one up and studied it with a scowl. I made coffee while they were settling in. When I returned with 3 mugs, my mother had settled into what I recognized as her lecture stance. I brought them their drinks and sat across from them to wait. My mother delivered a lecture about family loyalty and forgiveness. She discussed how weddings brought out the worst in people, how Claudia was under enormous stress, and how I needed to be the bigger person. I sipped my coffee and let her words wash over me, noting how she avoided criticizing the money I'd spent or Claudia's nasty comments. When she eventually halted, I took out my phone and played the tape I had taken of Claudia's talk with the bridesmaids. When Claudia said my name, I started recording through the door, a habit I'd developed over the years. My mother's face paled as Claudia's words filled the room, calling me weak and unattractive, and laughed about exploiting me for money. My father laid down his drink with trembling hands. He stood and walked towards the window, his back to us. My mother repeatedly opened and closed her mouth, searching for words to defend her younger daughter. Finally, she took a different approach, implying that Claudia hadn't meant it, and that people occasionally say things they don't intend. Next, I showed them my bank statements, which revealed that I had spent thousands of dollars on deposits, dress fittings, cake tastings, and planning sessions. My father turned from the window, his expression solemn as he scanned the numbers. My mother's defense of Claudia weakened with each receipt I presented. They left an hour later, with my mother still making half-hearted attempts to make peace, and my father remaining grimly silent. I knew they'd head directly to Claudia's flat. I knew my mother would try to rectify this, as she had with every other mess Claudia had made over the years. The remainder of the morning passed pleasantly. I tidied up the debris of yesterday's pandemonium, vacuumed the scattered documents, and attempted to restore order in my home. Around lunchtime, my phone began humming with notifications. Claudia took to social media. The first post occurred in her wedding planning group. She portrayed herself as the victim of an envious sister who destroyed her dream wedding out of vengeance. She said I stole her deposits, canceled her venue contracts, and ruined her life because I couldn't bear to see her happy. Within minutes, strangers were leaving comments expressing compassion and calling me nasty names. The following post went to her personal page, which was viewable to all of our mutual friends and extended family. This one includes meticulously cropped screenshots of our text chats, stripped of all context to make it appear as if I had canceled everything without provocation. She tagged our relatives, aunts, uncles, and family acquaintances to maximize awareness for her version of events. My phone constantly rang. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years called for explanations. My Aunt Helena, my mother's sister, left a voicemail accusing me of being selfish and unkind. My Uncle Marcus wrote me a lengthy text message expressing his disappointment with my behavior. Each message felt like extra weight on my chest. I spent the afternoon preparing a response. I compiled the entire text discussion, bank statements, and audio recording of Claudia's harsh words. I created a precise timeline of events, noting every payment I paid and every insult I received. However, when I tried to upload it, I hesitated. Do I really want everyone to see our family's dirty laundry? While I was debating, Claudia intensified. She set up a GoFundMe page called, "Help Me Save My Dream Wedding After My Sister's Betrayal." The description depicted a heartbreaking story of a bride devastated by her envious sister's actions. She stated she needed $18,000 to rebook everything, with only 3 weeks till the wedding date. The donations began instantly. $40 from a high school classmate, $100 from a co-worker, and $30 from someone I didn't recognize. Each gift included a statement supporting Claudia and denouncing me. My gut churned as I saw the total grow. I finally responded, but it was too late. Claudia's narrative had already taken hold. My well-documented proof was dismissed as futile attempts to defend my violence. People accused me of creating the recording, manipulating the bank statements, and being a bitter spinster who couldn't bear her younger sister's happiness. That evening, Claudia's fiancé, Daniel, arrived at my door again. This time he arrived alone and seemed fatigued. I allowed him in and offered him a beverage, which he gratefully accepted. Nothing says family meeting like parents arriving at dawn with their disappointment loaded and ready to go. The recording trick was excellent. Nothing can break through parental denial faster than hearing their precious child's genuine voice on speaker. We sat silently in my living room for a few minutes before he spoke. He told me about his chats with Claudia after she left yesterday, how she altered her story several times, how the details didn't fit up, and how she finally acknowledged to having me pay for items, but said it was because I offered. He asked to hear the recording again. I played it for him, watching his face fall as he learned his fiancé's genuine sentiments about me. When it was over, he sat in silence for a while. He then demanded to view the bank statements. I showed him everything, including the receipts from the dress fitting where Claudia insulted me. He left an hour later, taking copies of everything. I didn't inquire what he intended to do with them. That was between him and Claudia, but I could tell from the look in his eyes that something basic had changed in his perception of her. The next morning, I discovered my automobile had been vandalized. Someone had keyed long scrapes on both sides and destroyed one of the tail lights. My neighbor came over as I was standing in my driveway, marveling at the damage. She'd noticed an automobile matching Claudia's description in the early morning hours, but couldn't get a good look at the driver. I submitted a police report, understanding that no action would be taken until there was proof. The officer took photos and issued me a case number for my insurance. As he went, several other neighbors approached, having heard about the vandalism. They produced security camera footage from their homes, one of which captured a partial license plate that looked very similar to Claudia's. While dealing with the insurance company, I received a phone call from the wedding location. The manager indicated that someone pretending to be me had attempted to rebook the original reservation. They'd been skeptical because the caller didn't have the confirmation number and became angry when asked. They wanted to make sure I hadn't changed my mind about the cancellation. I stated that the cancellation was final and thanked them for checking. After hanging up, I called all of the other vendors to warn them about possible impersonation attempts. Unsurprisingly, the photographer and caterer had received similar calls. The florist stated that someone had showed up in person, pretending to be my assistant, but fled when questioned for identification. That afternoon, a process server arrived at my door. Claudia was suing me for the wedding expenses, saying I had verbally agreed to pay for everything as a present before intentionally withdrawing my support. The complaint sought $32,000 in deposits, emotional pain, and loss of marriage chance. I sat at my kitchen table, looking at the legal documents. This was getting worse than I could have anticipated. I assumed that canceling the contracts would put an end to my involvement, but Claudia seems intent to ruin me for daring to oppose her. I spent the entire looking up lawyers and eventually found one who specialized in family issues. We planned a consultation for the following day. As I gathered my papers, I realized I had been unwittingly planning for this possibility all along. Every receipt saved, every discussion documented, and every hurtful word preserved. My phone rang late at night. It was Daniel. His voice sounded empty when he informed me that he had ended the engagement. He presented Claudia with the facts, and she finally revealed her real colors, shouting at him about how he was ruining everything just like I had. He had moved out of their apartment and was staying with friends. After we hung up, I sat in the dark, contemplating this development. Part of me felt bad about my role in destroying their relationship, but the greater portion remembered Claudia's statements about manipulating me, thinking I was pathetic, and plotting to humiliate me. I didn't compel her to be cruel, I had simply stopped enabling it. The following several days blurred together. The lawyer evaluated my case and advised me that Claudia's claim had little merit based on the documentation I presented. She assisted me in filing a countersuit for defamation based on Claudia's social media posts and the GoFundMe hoax. We also sought a restraining order due to the vandalism and impersonation efforts. Meanwhile, Claudia's campaign against me became more intense. She arrived at my workplace during lunch and caused a commotion in the lobby. Security had to accompany her out as she screamed that I was a thief and a liar. My manager called me into his office later, concerned about the interruption. I explained the problem and offered documents, but I could see concern in his eyes. She started calling my acquaintances, telling complex stories about my alleged mental health concerns and financial crimes. Some people trusted her and cut me off without even asking for my side. Others contacted out, perplexed by the contradictory narratives. I spent hours on the phone explaining, arguing, and presenting proof. The GoFundMe site continues to expand, reaching over $12,000. Claudia sent regular updates, each one more dramatic than the last. She claimed that I had hacked her bank accounts, stolen her identity, and threatened her safety. The comment section erupted in hatred for me. Then came an unexpected twist. My cousin Adrian, who initially supported Claudia, contacted me discreetly. He'd been appointed as an administrator on the GoFundMe to establish legitimacy, given his family reputation for trustworthiness. But when he went to access the funds to assist Claudia in rebooking vendors, he discovered that she had already withdrew the majority of the money. He challenged her, and she stated that she needed it for legal bills to fight me. But he had done some research and discovered costs for fancy clothing, lavish dinners, and a weekend spa vacation. When he threatened to expose her, she disabled his admin access and barred him across all platforms. Adrian sent me screenshots of everything, even the bank records he had accessed before being shut out. We calculated that Claudia had spent more than $6,000 of the given funds on herself while still begging for more online. I met with my lawyer again and added fraud accusations to our countersuit. She was enthusiastic about our possibilities, especially because Adrian was eager to testify, but she told me that Claudia would become increasingly desperate as the walls closed in. She was correct. 2 nights later, I awoke to the sound of broken glass. My living room glass had been damaged by a brick, with a letter attached. Drop the case or worse will happen. I quickly called the police, and this time they took it seriously because of the escalation and previous reports. My neighbor's security camera definitely showed Claudia throwing the brick, despite her attempts to hide herself with a sweatshirt. The police detained her that morning and charged her with vandalism, harassment, and criminal threatening. My parents called and begged me to drop the accusations, but I declined. It had gone too far. Claudia spent the night in jail before my parents bailed her out. The terms of her release included no communication with me, but I knew that wouldn't stop her. I placed security cameras throughout my property and changed all of my locks. I altered my routine by driving different routes to work and buying at different stores. The familial schism deepened. Some families switched sides after seeing evidence of Claudia's deceit and brutality. Others dug in deeper, saying that I had provoked her somehow. Family gatherings became impossible. My mother stopped speaking to me completely, but my father called every now and again to check on my safety. Claudia's ex-fiancé, Daniel, contacted her again, offering to testify about her behavior if necessary. During their breakup, he discovered further lies, such as credit cards she had opened in his name and money she had stolen from their joint savings account. He was bringing his own legal case against her. Claudia's behavior became more erratic as the case progressed. She harassed me by creating bogus social media accounts, sending me packages containing frightening information, and even attempting to get me fired by filing false complaints with my employer. Each action was chronicled, contributing to the increasing body of evidence against her. After receiving numerous allegations of fraud, GoFundMe was eventually shut down. Donors demanded refunds, and Claudia faced possible criminal prosecution for wire fraud. Her carefully manufactured victim narrative was dissolving, and with it, her support network. One morning, Claudia was waiting for me in the workplace parking garage. She'd lost weight, her fashionable clothing had been replaced with wrinkled sweats, and her neatly groomed hair now fell limp about her face. She asked me to drop everything, pledging to reimburse the money, repent publicly, and get therapy. I proceeded past her toward my car, but she grabbed my arm. Her claws dug into my skin as she begged, threatened, and pleaded again. Everything was recorded on security cameras. When I finally pulled away and got into my car, she hammered on the windows, shouting that I had wrecked her life. That interaction resulted in her arrest for breaking the restraining order. This time my folks did not bail her out right away. My mother called, sobbing, stating she couldn't recognize her daughter anymore. I felt sympathy for Claudia, but I reminded myself that she had always been like this. The wedding had only just disclosed it. The preliminary hearing on the criminal charges has arrived. I sat in the courthouse, accompanied by my lawyer and the few remaining family members who supported me. Claudia entered handcuffed, her lawyer beside her. She appeared smaller, diminished by the consequences of her deeds. The prosecution presented the evidence: graffiti, threats, harassment, and fraud. Claudia's counsel attempted to portray her as a stressed-out bride who had made poor decisions, but the pattern of behavior was too obvious to ignore. The judge set a trial date and upheld the restraining order. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. Claudia's story had received local attention, but not the sympathetic coverage she had hoped for, as a cautionary tale about wedding mania and fraud. Why does Claudia keep pushing things when she is plainly caught? Fake social media profiles, frightening deliveries, and attempting to get her sister fired. Each step appears more frantic than the last, as if she cannot accept that her strategy failed. I declined to reply, walking hurriedly to my car while Claudia's lawyer proclaimed his client's innocence. The civil suit ran concurrently with the criminal proceedings. Claudia's countersuit was rejected immediately due to the evidence. My defamation and fraud claims proceeded. Her lawyer attempted to negotiate a settlement, but I refused. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about accountability. More terrible information came to light through discovery. Claudia had been intending to utilize me for months prior to the engagement, telling acquaintances she had discovered her wedding piggy bank. She had looked into the most expensive vendor particularly because she knew I would pay. The cruelty had been premeditated, intended to keep me off balance and obedient. My attorney also discovered a pattern of similar behavior in Claudia's background. Former friends came up with stories about money borrowed but never repaid. Events were wrecked by her demand for attention. Her manipulative behavior has wrecked relationships. I was the latest in a long series of victims, and the first to fight back. As the trials came, Claudia made one final desperate attempt. She made a sad video online apologizing and accepting responsibility for everything. She claimed to have discovered religion, to be undergoing therapy, and to want to make amends. The presentation was convincing to people who didn't know her, but I'd learned to see through her actions. The apology included subtle barbs at me, implying that I had overreacted and that a loving sister would have forgiven her. She declared that she was writing a book about her experience, portraying herself as a reformed bridezilla who had learnt significant lessons. My lawyer quickly sent a cease and desist letter for the book, citing pending legal processes and defamation concerns. Claudia responded by saying that I was attempting to stifle her story of redemption. The social media war continued, albeit with less backing for her this time. The criminal trial started on a wet Monday. I testified on the harassment, vandalism, and threats. The prosecutor showed the security footage, texts, and trend of escalation. Claudia's defense centered on portraying her as a lady driven to the brink by wedding stress and family betrayal. During cross-examination, her lawyer attempted to portray me as vengeful for canceling the wedding contracts. I calmly explained that I had just discontinued my financial support after discovering I was being used. I played a recording of Claudia's nasty statements, and the jury's expressions hardened as they heard her true feelings about me. Claudia took the stand in her own defense, crying sweetly as she told her story of sorrow. However, under cross-examination, her story fell apart. She could not explain the fraud, vandalism, or threats. Her emotions changed to wrath as the prosecution pressed her, and flashes of her true nature emerged. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before convicting on all counts. Claudia's face turned white when the decision was read. She stared at me across the courtroom, and for the first time, I noticed genuine dread in her eyes. The judge scheduled the sentence for the following month. The civil trial followed shortly thereafter. Claudia had little defense against my claims now that her criminal conviction had been proven. The judge granted damages for defamation and fraud. Though I knew I'd never see the money, Claudia having spent it all on her lifestyle and legal fees, more crucially, the judge imposed a permanent restraining order and ordered Claudia to publicly renounce her false remarks about me. She had to apologize on all of the same channels where she had propagated misinformation, admitting to fraud and harassment. It was a minor triumph, but it mattered. Sentencing day came with unexpected drama. Claudia's lawyer offered character witnesses and psychological exams to support probation. Given the escalation and lack of remorse, the prosecutor sought jail time. I gave a victim impact statement, explaining how Claudia's actions had affected every element of my life. In the end, the judge sentenced Claudia to 16 months in prison with the chance of early release on good conduct. She also ordered reparations for the damages and required therapy. Claudia sobbed as they dragged her away in handcuffs, continuing to play the victim. My folks were distraught. My mother chastised me for not being more forgiving and allowing the situation to progress to criminal charges. My father was more understanding, but he still mourned for the girl he believed he had raised. Our relationship may never fully recover. Some family members apologized for trusting Claudia's lies. Others remained convinced that I had overreacted. I learned to live with a divided family by focusing on the relationships that had made it through the test. My cousin Adrian and I became closer as a result of the incident. Claudia's ex-fiancé Daniel and I occasionally exchanged emails while we both processed the shock of realizing who she truly was. He'd begun treatment to figure out how he'd missed the symptoms. I did the same, going through years of manipulation that I had previously disregarded as sibling behavior. Claudia began sending letters through her lawyer 8 months after being sentenced. They were carefully written to avoid breaking the restraining order while still conveying her anger. She blamed me for everything, even her incarceration and shattered reputation. I forwarded them to my lawyer but did not respond. The wedding date, which had sparked everything, came and went quietly. I spent the time at home going over old photos of Claudia and myself as children. Before the rivalry, before the manipulation, before she'd learnt to see me as a resource rather than a sister, I lamented the relationship we'd never truly had. Life gradually reverted to a new normal. As the state of hypervigilance receded, the security cameras were turned off. I stopped looking over my shoulder constantly. When I walked by, work colleagues stopped whispering. The scandal faded and was replaced by other dramas. But the encounter had affected me completely. I'd learned to spot manipulation, set limits, and value myself above what I could supply for others. The thousands of dollars I'd lost on wedding deposits felt insignificant in comparison to the lessons I learned. I began volunteering with a domestic violence charity, sharing my experiences with others who had experienced financial and emotional abuse from family members. Many people were astonished to find that abuse did not necessarily originate from romantic partners, and that family might be just as harmful. A year after the trials, I learned that Claudia had been freed early for good behavior. The restraining order remained in effect, but I was still nervous. I strengthened my security precautions and notified my workplace, but weeks went by without incident. Then I discovered from family chatter that Claudia had relocated across the nation, stating she sought a fresh start where no one knew her story. She had legally changed her name and was working at a tiny boutique. Part of me hoped she had actually learnt and changed. The majority remained suspicious. My mother finally contacted me, offering to meet for coffee. We sat awkwardly in a cafe, unsure how to close the distance Claudia had left between us. She acknowledged she had always knew Claudia could be tough, but had hoped marriage would help her calm down. She apologized for failing to protect me from my sister's darkest tendencies. It was a start, but our relationship would never be the same. Too much had been said and done. But we started having monthly lunches, deliberately avoiding the subject of Claudia while reconstructing what we could of our mother-daughter relationship. Financial recovery took longer than emotional healing. Between legal bills and lost deposits, I had spent over $30,000. Insurance covered some of the vandalism damage, and I would later receive partial recompense, but the majority was simply gone. I gradually rebuilt my finances, becoming more cautious about how I spent money on others. Dating became complicated. How do you tell someone new that your sister is in jail due to a wedding dispute? When do you discuss the restraining order, fraud, or the year of harassment? I learned to be open about my problematic family circumstances while keeping the facts for people who gained my trust. Work improved once the drama subsided. My supervisor, who was originally concerned about the disruptions, became supportive after he understood the complete issue. Colleagues who had distanced themselves following the crisis slowly warmed up again. Professional life has stabilized. But the most difficult thing was learning to trust again. Every new acquaintance, family interaction, and thoughtful gesture from others was viewed with distrust. Was I being used? Were there any ulterior motives? Therapy helped, but the fatigue persisted. 18 months after all started, I received a final communication via legal channels. Claudia had written a letter accepting full responsibility for her conduct, acknowledging the anguish she had caused, and committing to follow the restraining order indefinitely. Her lawyer verified that she was not looking for anything in exchange, only closure. I reread the letter several times, looking for hidden meanings or manipulation, but it appeared real, or as genuine as Claudia could manage. I did not respond, but preserved the letter. Maybe someday I'll believe she has changed, perhaps not. The extended family eventually reached a new balance. Holiday celebrations are divided into two categories: those who maintained relationships with Claudia and myself, as well as those who picked sides. I went to the ones where I was welcome and created my own customs for the rest. Friends who had supported me through everything grew even closer. They'd seen me at my worst, suffering with public humiliation and private pain, yet remained unwavering. These ties grew in ways that would not have occurred without the catastrophe. I also received unexpected support from those who have coped with poisonous family members. Online communities, support groups, and casual discussions all highlighted how typical these behaviors are. Claudia's lawyer presenting character witnesses for someone who damaged property required a lot of nerve, like asking for a nice review after burning down a restaurant because the soup was cold. I wasn't the only family member who saw me as a resource to exploit. The wedding industry stories were especially poignant. Many people shared similar stories of family members asking them to support extravagant parties that they couldn't afford. The pressure to maintain family peace while being financially strained was a recurring issue. 2 years later, I could finally think about the experience without feeling angry. The scars remained, but they had become a part of my tale rather than a defining feature. I'd learned to set limits, value myself, and spot deception before it got too far. I wondered what might have occurred if I had remained mute that day at Claudia's flat. Would the wedding have taken place if I had accepted my relegation to ordinary guest and continued to pay for everything? Would the truth have come out anyway? But those queries were worthless. I'd made my decision when I heard her nasty words. I understood I was just a wallet to her. Everything that followed was her decision to escalate rather than accept responsibility. I had just refused to be her victim longer. The financial lessons stayed with me. I still assisted relatives and friends when needed, but with clear boundaries and expectations. Gifts were not responsibilities. Loans come with written agreements. And I never again prioritized someone else's goals over my own financial security. Professional treatment had helped me to see the patterns from our upbringing that had created this dynamic. Claudia had learned early on that tears and tantrums would get her what she wanted. I'd discovered that being helpful and generous garnered approval. We had both played our roles until I broke the script. The restraining order continued to provide a peculiar comfort. Knowing it existed and that there were legal penalties if Claudia attempted to contact me, gave me peace of mind. I never wanted our relationship to end with legal paperwork, but I accepted them as necessary protection. Occasionally, mutual acquaintances mentioned seeing Claudia on social media under her new identity. She appeared to be a life coach who assisted people in overcoming their mistakes. The irony was not lost on me, but I hoped her clients benefited from the transition, even if it was partially performance-based. My social media accounts remained secret, with only trusted friends and family members having access. The experience of having strangers scrutinize my life had left me with little desire for public prominence. Privacy seemed like a treasure I'd never again take for granted. Work emotions were simpler, as I learned to advocate for myself. The abilities gained from standing up to Claudia translated into professional confidence. I negotiated higher pay, took on leadership responsibilities, and stopped undervaluing my contributions. Dating becomes easier with time. I discovered someone who understood difficult families and did not criticize me for the restraining order against my sister. He faced his own familial issues, and we bonded over having to set boundaries with people we loved but couldn't trust. Instead, the wedding deposit money I had recovered was used to make a down payment on a house. It felt like poetic justice to use cash intended for Claudia's fantasy wedding to build my own dreams. The house was tiny, but it was mine, a refuge where I could control who entered. Family reunions were less tense as the years passed. Those who had taken sides immediately softened, understanding that relationships did not have to be all or nothing. I could attend a cousin's birthday party where Claudia might be mentioned without spoiling my day. My mother and I developed a new rhythm. We talked about books, gardening, and everything other than Claudia. She'd mention her sometimes, taking care not to push, and I'd listen without responding. It was a difficult balance, but it was effective for us. Volunteering with abuse survivors has been a regular part of my life. Sharing my tale allowed others to realize their own harmful conditions. Financial abuse by family members was more widespread than most individuals knew, cloaked behind shame and family loyalty. 4 years after that tragic day at Claudia's apartment, I finally felt completely free. The hypervigilance has dissipated into typical caution. The fury had evolved into comprehension. The pain had turned into wisdom. I'd survived and emerged stronger from the experience. Looking back on my life, I occasionally felt grateful for what had transpired. Not for the anguish or betrayal, but for the growth it prompted. I discovered strength I didn't realize I had. I learned to appreciate myself more than what I could do for others. The girl who had paid for everything to keep the peace was gone. In her place stood a woman who recognized her worth, established clear boundaries, and refused to be misled. It had been a costly education, both financially and emotionally, but one that would prove important in the long run. Sometimes, in quiet moments, I wondered if Claudia ever considered what she had lost. Not the wedding or the money, but the sister who had loved her despite everything, the one person who had always been there for her until she had gone too far. But those thoughts never lasted long. My life had progressed while hers had disintegrated. I had established genuine ties, whereas she had burned bridges. I had found serenity, whereas she had discovered repercussions. The best vengeance I'd learned was to have a good life and not to let her actions determine my destiny. The wedding that never happened taught me more than any ceremony could about family, self-worth, and the distinction between love and exploitation. Claudia wanted the perfect wedding at any cost. Instead, she gave me the gift of being free of her manipulation. And that, as I glanced around my calm home at the life I'd created, was more valuable than any wedding could ever be. The cost was high, in terms of family division and public humiliation, but the benefits were immense. Self-esteem, genuine relationships, and the assurance that I would never again give up myself for someone who saw me as nothing more than a means to an end. The narrative began with wedding planning letters requesting payment and finished with something far more valuable than money. The courage to say no, the strength to stay firm, and the insight to understand that true love never requires you to reduce your own or someone else's aspirations. Claudia had taught me that, but not in the way she meant. The morning after Claudia was released, I awoke to find a box on my doorway. There was no return address, but her penmanship was unmistakable. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was my grandmother's jewelry box, which had gone missing during one of her outbursts at my home. A single note inside said, "Starting fresh." I turned the box over in my hands, inspecting it for damage. The lock was broken, and numerous items were missing, including the pearl necklace our grandmother wore to her own wedding. I videotaped everything and emailed it to my lawyer, who acknowledged that technically the restraining order was violated but urged me not to pursue it unless the behavior increased. 3 weeks later, my cousin Adrian called with some alarming news. Claudia had contacted him through a common friend and asked him to set up a meeting with me. She claimed to know something regarding our grandmother's estate that I needed to know. Adrian had rejected, but she persisted, even offering him money to arrange an unplanned rendezvous. I intensified my attentiveness and buried my routines even farther. The grocery store I'd been shopping at for years became off-limits after the cashier noted someone matching Claudia's description and inquired about my shopping schedule. When my trainer received calls regarding my workout times, I switched gyms. My mother's birthday arrived, posing the first true test of our fragmented family dynamics. Regardless of the circumstances, she wanted both daughters present. I agreed to attend the early celebration since I knew Claudia would come to the evening one. My mother became ill on the morning of her birthday, so plans had to change. I raced to the hospital and saw my father in the waiting room. My mother had collapsed during breakfast, and tests were being undertaken. We sat in anxious quiet until the doctor emerged with good news. It was simply a reaction to new medication. Nothing serious. She would be discharged within hours. Claudia appeared in the doorway while we were waiting for our discharge papers. My father called her without thinking. She paused when she spotted me and approached our father, completely ignoring my presence. As I prepared to go, my mother's faint voice cried out from the chamber, begging for both of her daughters. The next 25 minutes were spent in terrible tension. Claudia sat on one side of the bed and I on the other, both completely focused on our mother. When the nurse arrived with discharge instructions, I offered to handle the pharmacy run, desperate to leave the oppressive environment. At the pharmacy, I discovered Claudia's ex-fiancé, Daniel, waiting in line. He appeared healthier than the previous time I saw him. The stress lines around his eyes have gone. We talked briefly while waiting. He had launched his own business, moved into a new apartment, and was dating someone who valued honesty. He added that Claudia had tried to contact him recently, but he had instantly blocked her. I returned to find the hospital room vacant, but for my father. Claudia had quickly gone after receiving a phone call alleging a workplace emergency. My mother was disappointed but not shocked. We drove her home in quiet, the unspoken weight of our fractured family hanging heavily in the car. Claudia's attempts to circumvent the restraining order became more frequent in the next weeks. She devised various plans to force interaction, including a phony charity call claiming I had committed a donation in Claudia's name. A wedding photographer contacted me regarding Claudia's booking for a sibling reconciliation photo shoot. Each attempt was documented and reported to my lawyer. The breakthrough occurred from an unexpected source. Claudia's former college roommate contacted out on social media. The grandmother's jewelry box arrived with missing parts and a broken lock. That starting fresh note felt more like a test of limits than a genuine transformation. Why would you return something that was damaged after keeping it for so long? She had seen news coverage of the trial and wanted to relate her personal experience. Claudia had pulled similar tactics throughout college, such as using roommates' credit cards, inventing emergencies to get money, and always playing the victim when found. The roommate produced documents from their time living together, including police reports from when Claudia stole and sold her laptop, before claiming it was a mistake. There were text messages that revealed the same manipulation techniques, the same planned malice concealed beneath a lovely facade. I shared this information with my therapist, who helped me better grasp the patterns. Claudia's actions was not actually about me. I had just been the most accessible target with the most resources. The realization provided a strange sense of tranquility. Her cruelty was not personal, it was pathological. Claudia was repeatedly recognized in the parking garage, so my workplace introduced extra security measures. Security cameras captured her wearing various disguises, including wigs, sunglasses, and even a fake maternity tummy once. Each occurrence was reported, resulting in a case of extended restraining order violations. The family dynamics shifted again when my Aunt Helena, who had initially condemned me, witnessed Claudia's manipulation firsthand. Claudia had contacted Mom for a loan, claiming that she needed the money for therapy to rebuild our relationship. When Helena volunteered to pay the therapist directly, Claudia's story unraveled. Helena called me in tears and apologized for not trusting me. She had provided Claudia $2,500 before realizing the therapy claim was a hoax. When she approached Claudia, she faced the same wrath and threats as I had. Helena submitted her own police report, which exacerbated Claudia's legal issues. Adrian called a family reunion at his place and invited everyone except Claudia. Approximately half of the family showed up. He showed a timeline of Claudia's behavior from childhood, including incidences that we had all discounted or excused. When organized, the pattern was obvious. Some family members remained in denial, saying that we were conspiring against Claudia, while others began to share their own experiences. Money borrowed but never returned. Lies are told to cover up stealing, and Claudia is constantly the victim of the situation. The discussion concluded with most participants agreeing to establish limits with Claudia for everyone's safety. My mother struggled the most with the family division. She experienced stress-related health problems, and her blood pressure rose anytime Claudia's name was spoken. My father finally put his foot down, insisting that they accept Claudia's decision. The arguments I overheard while visiting were heartbreaking. Claudia's escalation reached a perilous climax when she managed to gain a key to my house. I returned home from work to find things had been quietly altered. A picture frame had been rotated, books had been repositioned, and my coffee mug had been placed in the incorrect cupboard. Nothing was stolen. Just enough to let me know she was there. That night, a locksmith arrived and installed new high-security locks. My system was upgraded by the security provider to include motion sensors and fast police notice. I stayed with friends for a week while extra precautions were taken, such as reinforced windows and a panic button. Given Claudia's past, the police took the break-in very seriously. They boosted patrols in my neighborhood and encouraged me to consider temporary relocation, but I refused to be forced away from my house. This was my haven, and I would not let her take it away. Claudia's blunders started piling. The boutique where she worked uncovered anomalies in the register that led back to her. She was sacked and faced possible charges. Her new apartment complex evicted her for breaching the lease by subletting without permission. The meticulously crafted new existence was disintegrating. I learnt from family members that she had been briefly hospitalized for what they euphemistically referred to as tiredness. Adrian learnt that she had been placed on psychiatric hold following a public meltdown at a bank after being rejected a loan. The spiral was accelerating. My therapist assisted me in working through my conflicted emotions. Even though I had simply protected myself, I felt horrible as I watched Claudia's full ruin. Another portion was still outraged from the years of manipulation. The majority of people were fatigued and wanted everything to end. The restraining order violation charges from the break-in were finally enforced. Claudia was caught at a motel where she had been sleeping under a false identity. This time bail was rejected due to her history of infractions. The trial date was scheduled for 8 weeks out. During those 8 weeks I focused on strengthening my boundaries and protecting myself. A lawyer assisted me in forming a trust that would secure my assets from any future schemes. I moved employment to locate a position with more stability and better management. The fresh start felt liberating. My relationship with my parents improved as they accepted Claudia's decisions. Sunday dinners resumed, with an implicit understanding not to discuss Claudia, except for necessary legal updates. We found other topics to discuss. Their garden, my father's retirement plans, anything other than the daughter who had torn our family apart. The second trial was shorter than the first. Claudia had a strong record of infractions that had been extensively documented. Her counsel appealed for mental health therapy rather than incarceration, but the judge pointed out that she had had treatment options yet decided to continue harassing. Claudia earned an additional 14 months in jail for the offenses, to be served concurrently with the remainder of her sentence. The judge also extended the restraining order for a lifetime, with heavy consequences for any violations. Claudia gave me a hollow stare as they carried her away. She'd finally lost her fighting spirit. The family's reaction was muted this time. Even her most ardent supporters couldn't argue with the data. My mother grieved silently at home as my father comforted her. The ambition of reuniting her daughters was dashed with that second conviction. I focused on restoring what Claudia had attempted to ruin. Friendships were restored with those who had separated themselves amid the upheaval. Professional relationships improved as I demonstrated my dependability and skill. Dating was difficult, but it became doable with the appropriate partner who understood family trauma. 9 months passed smoothly. The hypervigilance melted into typical caution. Sleep came easier without worrying about what the morning would bring. I even began traveling again, which I had avoided while Claudia was free and unpredictable. Then came some surprising news. Claudia had been injured during a jail dispute. Nothing life-threatening, but significant enough to require hospitalization. My parents dreaded visiting her. I supported whatever decision brought them peace, while respecting my own boundaries. They went once, and returned shaken. Claudia blamed me for the attack, believing that I had arranged it from outside. The delusion was complete. My parents did not return, eventually believing that their daughter was beyond their aid. Work flourished as I redirected energy formerly spent on defense into productivity. A promotion resulted in increased responsibility and visibility. I accepted. I was no longer scared of success attracting Claudia's attention, and the restraining order and her incarceration served as a reliable cover. Volunteer work with survivors of domestic abuse has expanded. I began speaking at support groups, explaining how family members might also be abusers. Many folks felt better knowing they weren't alone in having family that saw them as resources to exploit, rather than persons to adore. A year into Claudia's second term, I received a letter via official channels. Prison officials had reviewed it, and confirmed that letter included no threats or infractions. Inside, Claudia had scrawled only 2 words. "I'm sorry." I peered at the words, looking for hidden meaning or manipulation. But sometimes the simplest explanation is correct. Maybe she was apologizing. Perhaps prison had finally exposed her delusions. Perhaps it was simply another manipulation. I would never know. And I understood I didn't have to. The letter was filed alongside all of the other papers, no longer as evidence, but as a reminder of how far I had come. From the girl who paid for everything to keep the peace to a woman who recognized and protected her worth. The transformation had been hard yet necessary. My mother's health improved as stress levels fell. She felt peace in knowing she had done her best with Claudia, even if the outcome was not as she had hoped. We grew closer as we shared our grief over the loss of our daughter and sister due to her own decisions. Friends who had been through the storm with me were chosen family. We celebrated holidays together, making new traditions without the stress of controlling Claudia's behavior. The meetings were smaller, but filled with genuine warmth rather than underlying fear. Professional achievement continues to grow. The abilities gained from surviving recognition transferred Claudia, documentation, boundary setting, and pattern wonderfully to business leadership. I mentored younger coworkers, particularly those struggling with challenging home issues that impacted their work. 18 months after my second conviction, I met someone wonderful at a conference. He understood complicated families, having had his own difficult sibling relationships. We bonded about how to protect ourselves while remaining open to love. The relationship progressed slowly but steadily. My cousin Adrian remained a close ally. We frequently thought on how Claudia's actions had unintentionally brought members of the family together. Those who remained together during the crisis formed stronger relationships than before. Silver linings in storm clouds. The residence I had so zealously guarded became a gathering place for the family members who had helped me. Claudia tried to undermine all of the typical family gatherings, including holiday dinners, birthday parties, and informal weekend barbecues. Life had taken a different path around the devastation she had inflicted. As Claudia's release date came, I prepared quietly. The lifetime restraining order offered protection. My support system was great. Security measures were now regular, not emergency responses. I'd created a life that she couldn't ruin with her craziness. The day passed without incident. Claudia was released to a halfway home in another state as part of her parole requirements. She had to keep her distance, undertake required therapy, and submit to regular monitoring. The system had finally identified the threat she posed. My parents chose not to maintain contact with her. The decision brought them both anguish and relief. They prioritized family bonds that offered joy over perpetual crisis. We all learned to refer to Claudia in the past tense, as if she were a ghost that used to haunt our lives. Life slipped into a calm pattern. Work challenges were manageable in comparison to what I'd experienced previously. Relationship issues appeared small after managing Claudia's tactics. I had gained perspective through fire, emerging stronger and wiser. The financial recovery was complete thanks to insurance settlements and prudent saving. I had rebuilt beyond what Claudia had cost me. But the true richness was in the lessons learned. The value of limits, the importance of documentation, and the strength that comes from standing fast. I wondered if Claudia ever completely realized what she had lost. Not just money or family support, but the sister who would have done anything for her out of love. Not manipulation. The wedding she had so passionately desired had cost her everything. In the pursuit of perfection based on falsehoods. But those thoughts were fleeting, swiftly replaced by gratitude for the life I had created. Strong friendships, important employment, and positive family relationships with those that choose truth over enabling. Claudia attempted to destroy me for refusing to fund her dreams. Instead, she had allowed me to create my own. The story that began with wedding demands evolved into one of survival and growth. Every attempt to break me showed hidden strength. Claudia wanted the perfect wedding at any cost. The cost had been everything, but not in the way she had anticipated. Looking back, I felt no satisfaction with her downfall, simply relief that it was ended. She had chosen her path with each escalation, transgression, and refusal to accept responsibility. I simply refused to walk with her anymore. That refusal had saved my life in ways I was still learning. The kid who'd sat at her kitchen table canceling wedding contracts had grown into a woman who understood her worth. The voyage between the 2 points had been harsh yet necessary. Claudia had been the trigger, albeit not in the way she had meant. Now that I am surrounded by genuine love and chosen family, I hardly think about her. The restraining order was filed away, a paper barrier that I no longer required. The best defense was the life I'd created, too full of genuine delight to allow for her disruption. At family gatherings, there would be a moment of silence where Claudia's absence was felt, but it would be brief, followed by laughter and conversation from those who had chosen love over manipulation. We had learned to be complete without her. The wedding that never happened taught us priceless lessons about family relationships versus trauma bonds. The difference between assisting and enabling, and the power of saying no. Claudia had requested that I fund her perfect day. Instead, I had funded my ideal life. One based on honesty, boundaries, and self-esteem. That was the true end to our narrative. Instead of spectacular confrontation or heartbreaking reconciliation, choose calm distance. She lived her life under judicial supervision in another state. I spent mine surrounded by folks who respected me for more than just what I could offer. The cost of escaping her manipulation had been high: family discord, court battles, and years of anxiety. However, the prize was immense. A life lived on my own terms, relationships built on mutual respect, and the assurance that I'd never again sacrifice my well-being for someone else's needs. In the end, Claudia had given me an unexpected gift by demonstrating the worst aspects of family life. She had taught me to recognize and appreciate the best. The wedding she had planned to celebrate her ideal life had instead revealed her true nature. And when I defended myself against that epiphany, I realized my own. Well, it was something, right? I appreciate you sticking around while I tried to make sense of everything. It's been a strange one, but in the greatest way. At Christmas, my sister mocked my son's ornament. I stood up before 25 guests, revealed her debts, and announced, "Her free ride ends tonight." My blood ran cold when my sister Victoria spoke those words. "Don't bring your family. They're low class and not on my level. Just you." Can you believe it? I'd spent 12 years supporting her extravagant lifestyle, working to raise my children on a nurse's wage, and this was my thank you. That Christmas was about to change everything for us, and I had to make a decision. I've always been the responsible one. While my younger sister Victoria pursued dreams of luxury, I created a life centered on what actually matters. My children, Sophie and Lucas, ages 9 and 7. Our humble 2-bedroom rental may not appear in magazines, but it's full of laughter and love. As a pediatric nurse, I sometimes work multiple shifts to provide for us. But seeing my children succeed makes every exhausting hour worthwhile. Victoria and I took different routes from the start. Growing up in suburban Michigan, we shared a bedroom, but we could have been from different planets. While I saved my stipend for academics and then college, Victoria spent it all on fashion magazines and makeup. I recall her 15-year-old remark, "I'm going to marry rich and never worry about money again." Our parents, hard-working teachers, would exchange concerned looks when Victoria made such claims. Dad would gently remind us that character outlasts stuff, whilst Mom emphasized that true success stems from contribution rather than accumulation. These teachings formed me, but they appeared to have no effect on Victoria. After college, when I studied nursing on scholarship and worked part-time, I began my profession and met Daniel, the father of my children. Our relationship did not last. He was not prepared for family obligations, but he gave me Sophie and Lucas. He sends child support checks when he recalls, but we don't rely on them. Meanwhile, Victoria left community college after meeting Alexander, the son of a prosperous real estate developer. Their whirlwind romance culminated in a grandiose wedding. I recall depleting my meager resources to assist them pay for the flowers Victoria said she required. She vowed to repay me someday, but that never happened. Instead, a pattern developed. Victoria would phone in tears over an outstanding credit card bill that was endangering her reputation, or she'd nonchalantly add how ashamed she'd be if she couldn't attend Alexander's friend's wife's spa weekend. Each time I'd wire money with the idea that it was only temporary until things were settled. Those things were never settled. And over the course of 12 years, I spent over $48,000 on sustaining my sister's charade. Why did I do that? Part of me still saw the small girl who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms. A part of me felt responsible for her happiness. And to be honest, part of me believed her assurances that once she and Alexander became successful, they would repay everything with interest. What Alexander didn't realize, and no one else knew save Victoria and myself, was that his family's fortune was primarily invested in real estate and was not available for everyday comforts. His monthly pay covered their mortgage and necessities, but Victoria's luxury wardrobe, spa treatments and costly parties were mostly paid by her schoolteacher sister's nursing wage. Victoria's Christmas celebrations grew increasingly expensive with each passing year, as did her condescending attitude. Last year she described my sensible automobile as archaic and that Sophie take elocution classes. I swallowed my pride, recalling our parents' steadfast conviction and family devotion. Regardless of the circumstances, my children adored their Aunt Victoria. They just saw the attractive woman who gave lavish presents and lived in a house. Sophie had been raving about Victoria's Christmas party for weeks, especially about seeing the 10-foot tree with its color-coordinated decorations and the chocolate fountain she had mentioned. Lucas had happily created a special ornament for his aunt's tree in art class, a clay star painted gold with crimson glitter. He'd carefully wrapped it and asked several times if I thought Aunt Victoria would appreciate it. "She likes fancy things," he continued, his small face serious. The invitation arrived in late November on thick cream card material with gold embossing, advertising their annual holiday party. I'd set the date and we'd started planning, saving a little each week for suitable gifts and attire. Then came the phone call, which changed everything. When I hung up after Victoria's surprising request, my hands shook so severely that I had to sit down. Her words rang through my mind. Low class, not at my level. I recalled all the times I'd eaten ramen to send her money. We had canceled our family vacation to the Grand Canyon because Victoria needed aid with her property taxes. The second job I'd chosen was cleaning medical offices on weekends. My initial thought was to call her back and tell her exactly where she could place her Christmas invitation. Instead, I emailed my best friend Isabel, who stopped by with a bottle of wine after her shift at the hospital where we both worked. "What?" Isabel shouted, pouring us each a large glass. "After everything you've done for her, Clara, you need to cut her off completely." "It's not that simple," I moaned, looking over to the kids' beds, where they were doing schoolwork. Isabel shook her head. "They love their aunt. And despite everything, she's still my sister. Your sister has been taking advantage of you for years. You work 55-hour weeks, and she uploads Instagram photographs from expensive vacations." "I know," I said. "But family is family. Mom and Dad always taught us to stick together." "Your parents also taught you about dignity and self-respect," Isabel said. "Would they want you to be treated this way?" That thought lingered with me long after Isabel had departed. The next morning, Sophie was gazing at the calendar where we had noted Victoria's Christmas party. "How many more days until Aunt Victoria's party?" she said excitedly. "I want to see if her pool is frozen like last year." Lucas approached us, carrying his wrapped ornament. "Do you think Uncle Alexander will do the scavenger hunt again? I almost found the golden candy cane last time." Their childlike enthusiasm made my decision even more difficult. How could I tell them we weren't welcome because their aunt believed we weren't good enough, that the gifts they'd helped choose weren't sophisticated enough to meet my sister's expectations? That evening, I took out the memory box, which had images of Victoria and me growing up. We were making sandcastles on Lake Michigan, riding bikes decorated with streamers, and opening Christmas presents in matching pajamas. When did money and position become more important to her than these shared experiences? I remembered our father's words when Victoria revealed she was marrying Alexander. "Just remember who you are, sweetheart. Where you come from? Money changes circumstances, not character." Dad had been gone for 4 years, and Mom too. What did they suggest me to do? The solution became plain. They would advise me to stand up for myself and my children while remaining open to reconciliation. That night, I made a decision. All 3 of us would attend the Christmas party. Victoria could choose to make a scene in front of her high society acquaintances. But I would no longer allow her delusions of grandeur to undermine the dignity of my children, or my own self-esteem. The following 12 days were spent preparing. I spent my Christmas bonus to buy Sophie a stunning, emerald green gown that made her eyes sparkle. I found Lucas a nice little outfit at a second-hand shop that appeared to be brand new. I splurged on getting their garments professionally ironed and made appointments at the salon where my friend Marco worked to get nice haircuts. I chose a basic black cocktail dress that I had previously worn to a hospital benefit, and I paired it with a statement necklace Isabel insisted on lending me. "If you're going into battle, you need proper armor," she'd said previously. I also carefully prepped the youngsters, emphasizing that while adults may differ from time to time, kids need not be concerned. "And Victoria is quite picky about her home," I stated during our family supper. "So we'll have to be very polite. And if she appears unhappy about something, it's not about you, okay? That's grown-up things." "Is Aunt Victoria mad at us?" Lucas inquired, his brow concerned. "No, sweetheart. Aunt Victoria just has a different way of doing things. But we're family, and family shows up for each other, even when it's hard." Sophie, sensitive beyond her years, analyzed my expression. "Are you and Aunt Victoria fighting?" I carefully chose my words. "We have different ideas about some things, but that's okay. People can disagree and still love each other." My nervousness intensified as Christmas came. I mentally rehearsed possible scenarios, ready replies to everything Victoria might say or do. I reminded myself of all the times I had dealt with tough families as a nurse, remaining professional even when emotions were high. I could do it for my children, myself, and yes, even Victoria, who, beneath her luxury clothing and status concerns, was still my little sister. The night before the celebration, I double-checked our gifts. Victoria's handcrafted scarf was wrapped in silver paper and finished with a blue velvet bow. Alexander's fishing book was complemented with a collection of hand-tied flies I discovered at a specialty shop. He mentioned wanting to learn fly fishing last year. For their home, I chose a hand-blown glass decoration by a local craftsman, not pricey, but clever and distinctive. That night I couldn't sleep since I was overthinking every possible conclusion of our unexpected entrance. By dawn, I'd accepted whatever would happen. We were going to show up with our heads held high, dignity intact, and ready to spend Christmas as a family, whether Victoria agreed or not. On Christmas Eve, we drove through the massive iron gates of Victoria and Alexander's estate. Fresh snow had fallen the night before, converting the 4-acre property like something out of a Christmas card. Pristine white coated the sweeping lawns and evergreen trees, each elegantly wrapped in white lights. As we neared the 2-story Georgian estate, workers were clearing the circular driveway. "Wow," Sophie exclaimed, pressing her face against the car glass. "It's like a castle." Lucas tightened his grip on his wrapped gift. "Do real princesses live in houses like this?" "Just your Aunt Victoria," I said, attempting to maintain a light tone. As I parked behind a line of fancy cars. Alexander's father had Mercedes, BMWs, and a Bentley, which I recognized. The house's facade was professionally decorated, with garlands framing each window, life-sized nutcrackers flanking the big front door, and a tasteful arrangement of poinsettias cascading down the stone steps. I'd seen similar exhibits in architectural magazines, but not up close. Sophie and Lucas climbed out of the car, their excitement evident as they cautiously walked down the cleared path in their dress shoes. I took it more slowly, balancing our gifts and the handmade cranberry bread I'd made that morning, a tradition from our mother that Victoria had always cherished. Before we could ring the doorbell, Victoria appeared, dressed in a scarlet couture gown that probably cost more than 3 months' mortgage payments. Her flawless blonde hair was pulled into an elegant updo, and jewels glistened at her earrings and throat. Her face flashed with real amazement for a single second before she recovered and smiled tightly. "Clara," she replied, her voice falsely cheerful. "And everyone. What a surprise." She looked behind us toward the driveway, apparently trying to see if any other guests had noticed our approach. She stepped back unwillingly to let us in after determining that the coast was clear. "I thought we discussed this," she said quietly as the kids walked past her into the soaring entryway with its 18-foot Christmas tree. "We did," I answered calmly. "And I decided that my children deserved to spend Christmas with their entire family." Before she could react, Alexander arrived behind her. His warm smile contrasted sharply with his wife's cold reception. "Clara and kids. It's great to see you." He hugged me sincerely before stooping to high-five Lucas and praise Sophie on her attire. "The more the merrier, right, darling?" he said, looking at Victoria. "Of course," she answered with tight teeth. "Let me show you where to put your things." She looked at our wrapped parcels with hardly concealed disgust. As we followed her through the marble-floored entryway, I noticed perhaps 25 guests conversing in the big room beyond. The air was filled with classical Christmas music from hidden speakers, while uniformed servers passed around trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. "Alexander's parents are here, as are the Andersons and the Taylor," Victoria told me, mentioning local socialites. "Oh, and the Wilsons just flew in from Aspen this morning. Daniel Wilson is considering Alexander for their new development project." I knew this for what it was. A reminder that significant people were around, and that I needed to behave appropriately. Translation. Avoid embarrassing her. "The children can put their coats in the mudroom," she said, pointing to a side corridor. "There's a media room downstairs where they can watch movies. Brittany, our sitter, is down there with the Andersons' kids." "Actually," I said gently. "Sophie and Lucas were looking forward to the party. Lucas even made you a special ornament for your tree." On cue, Lucas proudly displayed his tissue-wrapped product. "I made it myself." Victoria's flawless features flickered with something, annoyance, panic, as she took the package with fingertips, as if accepting a suspicious laboratory item. "How thoughtful. I'll just put this somewhere safe for now. Our tree decorator used a very specific color scheme this year." Lucas's face dropped somewhat, but he nodded boldly. Alexander, who had witnessed the exchange, stepped in fast. "Hey Lucas, why don't you show me this masterpiece? I bet it would look great on the family tree in the den, where we keep all our special ornaments." As Alexander took Lucas away, I wanted to hug him for his compassion. Victoria meantime led Sophie and me to the great room, muttering directions as we proceeded. "Try not to mention your job though. The Wilsons are germaphobes, and hospital talk makes them uncomfortable. And if anyone asks where you live, just say north of the city rather than naming your actual neighborhood." Before I could respond to these outrageous remarks, we entered Victoria's carefully prepared guest list. Conversations were briefly halted as interested eyes examined the newcomers. Sophie pressed closer to my side, suddenly shy amid these new, immaculately dressed individuals. "Everyone, this is my sister Clara and my niece Sophie," Victoria said with a fake smile. "They decided to surprise us tonight." A mumble of polite pleasantries followed, though I caught a few exchanged glances that suggested Victoria had already mentioned me, and not in a good way. Sophie was quickly attracted away by another young girl her age, leaving me alone for a few moments. I received a glass of champagne from a passing server and took a little taste while observing the surroundings. The decor was magnificent, with crystal, silver and white with deep burgundy accents. Fresh flowers decorated every surface, and a big stone fireplace blazed with a nicely planned fire. I was admiring an ice sculpture of a reindeer when I overheard Victoria talking to two women near the bar. "Yes, that's my sister," she said softly. "Single mom, works at the hospital. I try to include her when I can, you know. Charity begins at home and all that." The women nodded sympathetically, with one touching Victoria's arm in apparent admiration for her charity. I felt my cheeks heat but kept my cool, recalling my reason for being here. This was not about me. It was about my children having a family Christmas and discovering that they were deserving of respect, regardless of their zip code or the expense of their clothes. After about 30 minutes of small conversation with various guests, the majority of whom appeared startled to find Victoria had a sister, I excused myself to check on the kids. Sophie was helping younger youngsters with a craft project, and her innate caring talents were evident in her careful directions. Lucas was excitedly showing Alexander's father his ornament, which was now conspicuously displayed on a smaller tree in the wood-paneled den. As I observed them, Victoria appeared at my side. "We need to talk," she remarked tersely before leading me into an adjacent powder room and locking the door. "What were you thinking, showing up after what I told you?" she asked, crossing her arms over her beautiful gown. "I was thinking that family doesn't exclude family from Christmas," I said calmly. "And that my children deserve better than to be deemed low-class by their own aunt." "You know what I meant," she huffed. "This is an important night for Alexander's business connections. I need everything to be perfect." "And we're imperfect, how exactly?" I was curious. "Because we don't wear designer labels? Because Lucas's ornament doesn't match your color scheme?" "Don't be dramatic." Victoria rolled her eyes. "You know how these things work. Appearances matter." "To who, Victoria? To these people you're trying so hard to impress? Do they know that half your appearances are funded by your nurse sister's salary?" Her pupils drooped with worry. "Keep your voice down. And that's not fair. I've had some temporary cash flow issues. That's all." 12 years of temporary issues, I explained. "But we're not discussing that now. We're here as family. The children are behaving beautifully and will continue to do so. I suggest you do the same." Without waiting for her response, I unlocked the door and returned to the party, my heart hammering and my resolve stronger than ever. Whatever game Victoria was playing, I was no longer willing to participate. At 7, a server gently struck a crystal chime, indicating that dinner was ready. Guests began to make their way to the formal dining room, where a table that could comfortably seat 25 was arranged with perfection worthy of a military general. Fine china, sterling silver and crystal glassware shone under the light of an antique chandelier. Each place setting contained 2 wine glasses, many forks, and a hand-calligraphed name card. I was disappointed to see that Sophie, Lucas and I had no place cards. Victoria approached, faking disappointment at the blunder. "Oh dear, it appears our calligrapher did not prepare cards for you because you were not on the original guest list. Let me just rearrange things," she stated loudly enough for other visitors to hear. Alexander made a smooth intervention. "No problem at all, kids. Would you like to sit by me? And Clara, there's plenty of room between Mrs. Wilson and my mother." As we took our allotted seats, mine between 2 older women who looked at me with polite curiosity, I watched Victoria whispering to the waiter, who nodded quickly before returning with 3 place settings that clearly did not match the rest of the table. The message was not subtle. We were afterthoughts, accommodated but not fully welcomed. The first item arrived, a beautiful butternut squash soup topped with truffle oil and microgreens. Lucas looked at it warily before taking a timid spoonful. Sophie, who was always more adventurous with food, plunged in enthusiastically. "So Clara," said Mrs. Wilson, Alexander's potential business partner's wife, "Victoria tells us you work at a hospital." "Yes, I am a pediatric nurse at County General, I told you." "How noble," she responded with apparent respect. "My sister volunteered at a children's hospital last year. She found it quite intense." "It can be challenging," I said, "but also incredibly rewarding. There's nothing quite like helping a child through illness and seeing them recover." "And you're raising 2 children on your own?" Alexander's mother inquired from the other side. Her tone was friendly, not critical. "Yes, Sophie and Lucas. They're wonderful kids." "They certainly appear to be." She nodded, glancing across to where they sat with Alexander. "Well-mannered and bright. You should be proud." Following Victoria's callous attitude, This simple acknowledgement almost brought tears to my eyes. Thank you. I am. Victoria held court across the table, recounting their recent weekend at Vale's Premium Ski Resort. The private lessons were worth every penny, she said. The instructor used to train Olympic athletes. Speaking of expenses, a man I knew as Alexander's college friend asked, "How's that investment opportunity you mentioned last month? Did you decide to buy in?" Alexander appeared slightly uncomfortable. "We're still considering our options. The timing might not be right with the new pool house renovations." "Oh, we're definitely moving forward with a pool house," Victoria corrected him. "I've already approved the final designs, imported marble, smart home integration throughout. It's going to be featured in Modern Luxury magazine." Alexander's amazement was obvious, but swiftly concealed. I wondered how many of Victoria's unilateral decisions were supported by my loans. The second course arrived. Frise salad with poached pears and candied walnuts. Lucas hesitated at the unusual greens, but after receiving my encouraging gesture, he bravely took a bite. "And what neighborhood do you live in?" said a woman farther down the table, her diamond earrings catching the light as she inclined her head. Before I could respond, Victoria interfered. "Clara lives in a charming area north of the city, very up and coming. Elmwood Park," I announced clearly. "It's a wonderful community with excellent schools and parks." The woman's look indicated she was unfamiliar with the middle-class suburb, but she nodded pleasantly. "And what school do your children attend?" she inquired. "My grandson just started at Lakeside Academy again." Victoria tried an interception. "They're in the public school system. Clara is very involved in their education. Sophie and Lucas attend Elmwood Elementary," I stated simply. "Sophie's in the gifted program for mathematics, and Lucas is thriving in their arts curriculum." Lucas accidentally knocked over his water glass while we were talking. Water splashed across the immaculate tablecloth as the crystal plummeted. His face crumpled in humiliation. "I'm sorry," he whispered, desperately attempting to clean up the liquid with his napkin. Before I could reassure him, Victoria's voice broke through the silence. "This is exactly why children should eat separately until they're properly trained for formal dining." The nasty comment lingered in the air. Lucas's lower lip quivered, and Sophie's shoulders tensed in defense of her brother. Alexander promptly gave Lucas his own napkin. "No harm done, buddy. I did much worse at my parents' dinner party when I was your age. Knocked over an entire gravy boat onto my father's boss." His father chuckled in agreement. "Ruined a perfectly good suit, but suits can be replaced. Good company can't." The warm response from Alexander and his father appeared to upset Victoria, whose grin had become increasingly stiff. As the evening went, she focused the conversation on her recent charitable activities, which included organizing a fundraiser for the art museum's new wing. "We raised over $250,000, she bragged. "The chairwoman said it was the most successful event in their history." "That's wonderful," Alexander's mother said. "Specifically?" Victoria paused, evidently unaware of the fundraiser's true goal beyond social prestige. "Oh, various educational initiatives, of course." "Actually," said another visitor, "I believe it's primarily funding the new contemporary exhibition space. My wife is on the museum board." Victoria's smile grew tighter. "Yes, exactly, that's what I meant." The main dish arrived, herb-crusted rack of lamb served with truffle mashed potatoes and haricot verts. As the servers brought each plate with planned perfection, I noticed Sophie looking at the array of utensils with trepidation. "Start from the outside and work your way in," I whispered, having learned formal dining etiquette prior to our visit. Victoria noticed the exchange and grasped the opportunity. "Sophie, darling, that's your salad fork. You're using the dinner fork. The larger one." Sophie flushed quickly and switched utensils. "It's hard to keep track when there are so many," Victoria said, addressing the entire table. "Proper table manners are really something that should be taught from an early age, but I suppose in public schools, they have other priorities." Several guests squirmed uncomfortably with this transparent dig. Alexander's mother raised an eyebrow, but kept silent. Alexander was discussing dinosaurs with Lucas, purposefully ignoring his wife's comment. "Actually," I replied evenly, "Sophie and Lucas have lovely manners. They're just not accustomed to 7-piece place settings. But they're quick learners." "Of course they are," Alexander's mother said, giving Sophie a positive smile. "And you're doing just fine, dear. I still mix up my fork sometimes, and I've been attending formal dinners for 35 years. Victoria, having failed in her attempt to embarrass my children, shifted her attention to the gift I'd brought, a hand-blown glass ornament now displayed on a side table alongside other hostess gifts. Clara brought the most interesting ornament, she said. It's quite folksy, isn't it? Handmade by a local artist, she told me. May I see it? Alexander's mother inquired, appearing genuinely interested. The ornament was handed to her, and she studied it with admiration. This is beautiful workmanship. Is this from that new glass studio downtown? I've been meaning to visit. Which programs will benefit? Yes, Firelight Studios, I responded. The artist trained in Venice before opening his shop here. I must get his information before I leave, she remarked, carefully returning the ornament. This would make a lovely gift for my sister. Victoria's attempt to downplay my gift had failed, exacerbating her clearly mounting irritation. Her criticisms became more pointed as the event went through its final courses, a cheese selection followed by a lovely chocolate mousse. When Lucas discussed his school's impending science fair, she commented on how privileged the private school students were to have real laboratories with suitable equipment. When Sophie hesitantly mentioned that she had made the honor roll, Victoria commented that the criteria in public education must be different because every child at Lakeside Academy is required to maintain at least a 3.8 GPA. Each comment was delivered with a smile that did not extend to her eyes, and each was intended to show her world's superiority above ours. For hours I kept my cool, telling myself that my children were watching and learning from how I handled the situation. But as I watched Sophie's wilting stance and Lucas's increasingly forced smile, something inside me moved. Years of accepting Victoria's condescension, subsidizing her fantasies, and putting family peace ahead of personal dignity culminated in a sudden, unequivocal resolution. When Victoria mockingly hailed Lucas's department store suit as gorgeous and suggested I visit the children's consignment shop, where struggling families can obtain nice old clothes, I noticed tears well up in my son's eyes, and I knew the time for courteous forbearance had passed. After dinner, guests moved to the great room for coffee, desserts, and what Victoria described as a traditional gift exchange among close friends. This clearly did not include us, as no one had informed me of the tradition, leaving me without acceptable gifts for the assembled company. Victoria made sure everyone was aware of the oversight. "Don't worry about not bringing anything for the exchange, Clara," she exclaimed as servers handed out little, nicely wrapped items to each guest. "You couldn't have known since you weren't originally." Several attendees appeared to be unhappy with this pointed exclusion. Alexander moved fast to intervene. "Actually, let's consider Clara and the kids' presents a special gift this year. Family is what Christmas is all about, isn't it?" His genuine warmth only underlined Victoria's coldness. As visitors began to open their presents, displaying pricey items such as cashmere scarves, artisanal spirits, and exquisite candles, Victoria arrived with our gift. Still wrapped in silver. "Let me open this now," she said to the room. "My sister brought something homemade, I believe." Her emphasis on homemade made it sound like I had tied up a macaroni necklace. I watched as she carelessly tore the paper, revealing the handcrafted scarf I'd purchased from a local artisan shop. "Oh," she exclaimed in amazement, "it's colorful." "Thank you, Clara. I'm sure it will be perfect for gardening or something." The scarf, a lovely piece of hand-dyed silk in subtle jewel tones, was clearly not gardening wear. Several women around expressed their appreciation for the music, with one even inquiring where it came from. "I imagine a small shop in Clara's neighborhood," Victoria said before I could respond. "They have the most quaint little businesses there, so budget-friendly." She laid the scarf aside without further comment and went on to open gifts from other guests, gushing with excitement at each one. Lucas, who had been quietly watching from beside me, tugged on my sleeve. "Mom," he muttered. "And Victoria doesn't like our presents, does she?" "Some people have trouble appreciating thoughtful gifts, sweetheart," I said quietly. "That's about them, not the gift." Sophie, overhearing the conversation, put her hand into mine and clasped it firmly. My heart was filled with pride at my children's emotional intelligence in the face of such awful behavior. Victoria, on the other hand, had moved on to telling stories, mainly childhood anecdotes designed to cast me in a negative light. "Did you know Clara once showed up to my sweet 15 in a homemade dress?" she asked the assembled guests, chuckling. "Mom tried to teach her to sew, and Clara insisted on making this horrific purple creation. The seams were coming apart by the end of the night. What she left out was that our family couldn't afford to buy me a new frock that month because Dad's medical fees from his back surgery had strained our finances. I'd been up 3 nights in a row working on that outfit, resolved not to ask for money we didn't have. And in college," she went on, "she dated this absolutely hopeless boy who worked at the campus bookstore. He would pick her up on a bicycle with a milk crate attached to the back as a passenger seat. Can you imagine that? That despondent youngster had been working his way through college while saving for medical school. The bicycle was his only mode of transportation, and he'd added the crate particularly so he could take me on dates despite not owning a car. Victoria gradually destroyed my dignity in front of her social circle with each narrative, all while pretending to tease me as a sister. I noticed Alexander become increasingly uncomfortable, occasionally attempting to change the subject, but Victoria seemed eager to continue her show. The final straw came when she started criticizing my parenting directly. "It's really admirable how Clara manages with the children considering their circumstances," she told the entire audience. "Public school, no father figure, living in that neighborhood. It's not what I would choose, of course, but Clara has always been content with less." Sophie and Lucas were both within earshot, and their expressions fell. Lucas' lower lip quivered slightly, and Sophie's face flushed with humiliation. Something inside of me cracked right then. After 12 years of supporting Victoria's charade, enabling her illusions of grandeur, and putting her feelings before of my children's well-being, everything became crystal clear. I rose up and smoothed my clothing with purposeful calm. "Excuse me," I said, my voice firm. "I'd like to propose a toast." The room became quiet as guests turned toward me, some seeming intrigued, others uncomfortable. Victoria's expression changed as a waitress gave me a champagne flute. "First, I want to thank Victoria and Alexander for including us in their beautiful Christmas celebration, I told you. Family gatherings are precious, especially during the holidays." Victoria's countenance relaxed slightly, as if she expected me to smooth things over. "I'd like to toast my sister," I added. "To Victoria, who has built an impressive life for herself and has always had such discerning taste." There were murmurs of agreement across the room. Victoria smiled triumphantly. "Such discerning taste, in fact, that maintaining it has cost approximately $3,500 a month for the past 12 years. The room fell completely silent. Victoria's smile had frozen on her face. "You see," I said softly, "while Victoria has been sharing stories about my supposedly humble life, she's neglected to mention that her designer wardrobe, spa memberships, luxury vacations, and many of the furnishings in this beautiful home have been subsidized by her low-class sister, the nurse, who apparently isn't quite good enough to attend her Christmas party." Gasps and awkward shuffling filled the room. Alexander's face indicated full astonishment followed by dawning awareness. "For those who are mathematically inclined," I replied quietly, "that's approximately $500,000 over 12 years. Money that could have gone toward my children's college funds or perhaps purchasing a home in a neighborhood Victoria might find more acceptable." I reached for my phone and opened my banking app. I have records of every transfer, every bill paid, every credit card statement covered when Victoria called in panic because her card was declined at Neiman Marcus or the spa. "Clara, stop it!" Victoria snarled, her cheeks depleted of color. "You're embarrassing yourself." "No, Victoria," I said for the first time in 12 years. "I'm not embarrassing myself. I'm simply telling the truth." I turned to face Alexander straight. "I'm sorry you're finding this out this way. I believed Victoria when she said you knew about our financial arrangement. I see now that wasn't true." Alexander's expression was a mix of amazement and betrayal as he looked at his wife. "Victoria, what is she talking about?" Victoria's composure eventually broke. "She's exaggerating. It was just a few loans when we were getting established. Nothing like what she's claiming." "Let's see," I said, thumbing through my phone. "Last month alone, $2,500 for the landscaping deposit, $600 for your spa weekend, $900 for the designer boots you couldn't live without. Should I continue?" The silence was terrible. Even the servers had stopped, transfixed in place by the unfolding spectacle. "So," I said as I raised my flute, "I'd like to toast my kept sister, who thinks she's rich, and to announce that I'll be stopping payment on your luxuries effective immediately. Merry Christmas, Victoria." I took a sip of champagne, placed down my glass, and looked at my children. "Sophie, Lucas, it's time for us to go. Please thank Uncle Alexander for his hospitality." Lucas was perplexed, but obediently thanked Alexander, who appeared too stunned to speak. Sophie, with wisdom beyond her years, just nodded and collected her belongings, intuitively knowing that something big had just occurred. As we walked through the silent room, past Victoria's stunned friends, and got our coats from the mudroom, I felt lighter than I had in years, as if an unseen burden had been removed from my shoulders. We had just gotten to our car when I heard footsteps crunching in the snow behind us. I turned to see Alexander approaching, his face a confusing mix of wrath, uncertainty and disbelief. "Clara, wait," he said. "We need to talk about this." Victoria was following him down the mansion steps, her fashionable shoes too high for the snow, causing her to slip and stumble. "Kids, get in the car please," I urged calmly, opening the back doors. Turn on your tablets. I need a few minutes with your aunt and uncle. Sophie and Lucas complied without argument, realizing the gravity of the situation. After they were situated, I turned to face my sister and brother-in-law. How dare you? Victoria snarled, her voice quiet yet angry. You've humiliated me in front of everyone who matters. How dare I said incredulously. You called my children low class. You mocked their clothes, their education, their home. You deliberately tried to make them feel inferior. And you're concerned about your humiliation. You've been helping Victoria financially? Alexander asked, his gaze riveted on his wife. For 12 years without my knowledge. Yes, I responded simply. Since shortly after your wedding. It started with small amounts. A credit card bill here, a shopping splurge there. Victoria always said it was temporary, that you were building your business and couldn't access family funds yet. Over time the amounts increased, and the temporary situation became permanent. Alexander ran his fingers through his hair, clearly pondering this discovery. The spa memberships, the designer wardrobes, the first-class upgrades whenever we travel. Most of it? I nodded. Not everything, of course, but a significant portion. She's exaggerating, Victoria said anxiously. It was just occasional help when things were tight. Sisterly support. She's making it sound like charity. Let me see your phone, Alexander said abruptly, extending his hand to me. I hesitated slightly before unlocking my banking app and handing it to him. He scrolled silently for a few moments, his expression darkening with each swipe. Monthly transfers of $2,500 to $4,000, he read aloud. For years. Direct payments to Nordstrom, Saks, the country club. Victoria, what the hell is this? Alexander, please. Victoria's voice took on a begging tone that I'd rarely heard. It's not what it looks like. Clara offered to help. She wanted to contribute. Contribute? I repeated. Victoria, I've been working 55-hour weeks, eating ramen for dinner, and putting off home repairs to fund your lifestyle. I've delayed saving for my children's education to pay for your spa days. You never said no, she responded. I asked, and you always said yes. That was your choice. Because you're my sister, I answered, my voice breaking. Because every time you made it sound like an emergency. Because you promised it was the last time. Because I believed you when you said you'd pay it back someday. Alexander returned my phone, his look unreadable. The landscaping for the pool house, he explained quietly. You told me your parents had left you a special investment account that matured. Victoria faltered. I needed to tell you something. You wouldn't have approved the renovation otherwise. And the trip to Bali last year. You said that was a bonus from your interior design client. Alexander. Please. Victoria whispered. Not out here, he said, his tone tightening. No, I think out here is exactly where this conversation belongs. We've apparently been living a lie inside those walls for years. As they faced off, I became intensely aware of my children waiting in the car, the cold seeping through my dress coat, and the curious faces watching from the mansion's windows. This confrontation was necessary, but it should not have taken this form. This is between you two now, I stated firmly. My part in it is over. I won't be sending any more money, Victoria. Not a dollar. You'll need to be honest with Alexander about your finances and make whatever adjustments are necessary. You can't just cut me off, Victoria argued, worry rising in her voice. What about the credit card bill due next week? The spa package I've already booked for New Year's. Her entitlement tone reaffirmed that I had made the correct option. Those are your problems now, not mine. I have my own family to take care of. We are your family, she said. Yes, you are, I confirmed. And family treats each other with respect, not contempt. When you're ready to have a relationship based on mutual respect rather than financial dependence, I'll be here. Until then, I need to focus on Sophie and Lucas. Alexander, who had remained quiet for a few moments, suddenly spoke. Clara, I want you to know I had no idea about any of this. I would never have allowed it if I'd known. I believe you, I replied simply. And I'm sorry you're finding out this way. He nodded before turning to face Victoria. We need to go back inside. Your guests are waiting, but when they leave, you and I are going to have the most honest conversation of our marriage. Victoria's face crumbled, and the carefully built facade eventually collapsed. For a brief moment, I saw the sensitive little sister I'd always tried to protect. The girl who was so insecure about our modest upbringing that she created an entirely separate identity to avoid it. Part of me wanted to console her, to assure her that everything would be fine, as I had done numerous times before. But another part, the one that had finally found its voice tonight, understood that this was a necessary reckoning for both of us. "Goodbye, Victoria," I replied softly. "Merry Christmas." As I went to get in my car, I heard her shout my name again. When I looked back, she stood alone on the cold driveway, her immaculate makeup ruined with tears, and she seemed smaller without Alexander by her side. "What am I supposed to do now?" she inquired, and for the first time in years, her inquiry lacked manipulation. Only genuine dread. "You figure it out," I replied honestly. "Like the rest of us do. One day at a time." With that, I got into my car and drove away from the mansion with its dazzling lights and watchful eyes, returning to our modest house, where the Christmas tree was smaller, but the love was true. In the rearview mirror, I could see my children's reflections, their faces gloomy as they processed what they'd seen. "We will have a good discussion about it tomorrow." I would explain that loving someone sometimes entails setting limits, that worth is determined by character rather than goods, and that the truth, no matter how tough, is always preferable to a beautiful falsehood. But tonight, as we drove through the calm, snow-covered streets, I simply reached back and gripped their hands, happy for the genuine existence we had, free of the stress of upholding someone else's fantasy. The drive home from Victoria's mansion felt weird, as if we were passing through other universes rather than just neighborhoods. Christmas lights twinkled along the way, and snowflakes floated lazily between our headlight beams. Sophie and Lucas had fallen silent in the back car, each processing the evening's dramatic events in their own way. "Are you mad at Aunt Victoria?" Lucas eventually inquired in a low voice. I pondered my response carefully. "Not mad exactly. Disappointed. Sometimes people we love make choices that hurt us, and it's okay to feel sad about that." "Is she still our aunt?" Sophie's realistic question got to the heart of what both children were probably pondering. "Of course she is," I told them. "Family is forever, even when relationships get complicated. But sometimes family members need time apart to figure things out." When we got home, our simple Christmas tree greeted us through the front window, its multicolored lights in stark contrast to Victoria's professionally arranged monochrome display. Inside, I kicked off my heels with relief and proposed an impromptu Christmas Eve celebration of our own. "Let's make hot chocolate and watch a holiday movie," I said. The fancy party wasn't much fun anyway. "Can we open one present tonight?" Lucas inquired, his resilience already regaining strength. "I think that is a fantastic idea," I agreed. Within 30 minutes, we had completely transformed our evening. We sipped homemade hot chocolate topped with small marshmallows while watching How the Grinch Stole Christmas on television. The children each opened one carefully chosen gift, new pajamas that they promptly changed into, and the tension from Victoria's estate gradually dissipated in the warmth of our little living room. After the kids went to bed, I sat alone by the Christmas tree, finally able to process the severity of what had occurred. For 12 years, I had supported Victoria's dream existence at the price of my own family's safety. Tonight, I had finally broken the pattern. The relief was evident, but so did the anguish over the relationship I had planned to have with my sister. My phone vibrated with a text message from Isabel. "How did it go?" I scribbled down a brief description that concluded with, "I'll call you tomorrow with details." "Children are sleeping. I'm okay." She quickly responded, "I'm proud of you. Merry Christmas to you. No more financing ungrateful siblings." Christmas morning brought fresh snow and eager children who had temporarily forgotten the previous night's events in favor of opening presents. We FaceTimed with their father, Daniel, who wishes them a Merry Christmas from his new home in California. Though our relationship had ended years ago, we maintained a cordial friendship for the sake of our children. Around lunchtime, my phone called from an unknown number. It was Alexander. "Clara, I hope I'm not interrupting your Christmas," he said, his voice tired. "I wanted to check that you and the kids got home safely last night." "We did. Thank you," I said, entering the kitchen for privacy. "How are things there?" He breathed deeply. "Difficult." After the guests left, Victoria and I talked. Really talked for the first time in years. "I had no idea about the financial arrangement between you two. I'm still processing it all." "I understand. It's a lot to take in. I want you to know I've frozen the credit cards and asked for a complete audit of our finances," he said later. "The extent of the deception, it's larger than even you knew. There are loans in my name I never authorized, accounts I didn't know existed." My gut twisted with fear. "Alexander, I'm so sorry." "Don't apologize. You're not to blame for Victoria's choices." His tone softened. But I am sorry for how she treated you and the children. It was inexcusable. Thank you for saying that, I responded, moved by his appreciation. We're getting help, he said. Financial counseling, marriage counseling. It's going to be a long road. He was still thinking. Victoria, struggling behind all that arrogance, is someone who never felt good enough. It doesn't excuse her behavior, but maybe it explains some of it. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table, replaying his comments in my head. Had I contributed to Victoria's fears by continually taking responsibility and bailing her out, instead of letting her face the consequences? These were questions without simple answers. In the days that followed, I felt a peculiar mix of emotions. Liberation interspersed with periods of remorse, relief tinged with sadness. The practicality of my decision became clear very fast. My financial account began to heal after I stopped having to support Victoria on a regular basis. I established a decent college fund for the kids and arranged long overdue repairs to our outdated HVAC system. I also started therapy after realizing that untangling 12 years of financial codependence required expert help. My therapist assisted me in comprehending the complicated dynamics at work, how my desire to protect Victoria had evolved into enabling, and how my own self-worth had become inextricably linked to being the dependable savior. 10 days after Christmas, an envelope arrived at Victoria's address. Inside was a check for $4,000, a pittance compared to what she'd gotten over the years, but nonetheless substantial, and a simple note. A start. I apologize. V. I deposited the check but did not immediately respond. Actions speak louder than words, and a single payment does not erase years of abuse and disdain. Alexander called again in late January, this time asking if I could meet with both. Victoria has been working on herself. She wants to apologize properly, but understands if you aren't ready. I agreed to meet in a neutral spot, a quiet cafe midway between our homes. When I arrived, Victoria looked very different from the polished socialite who had entertained Christmas Eve. Her fashionable outfits had been replaced by ordinary jeans and a sweater, and her sophisticated hairstyle by a natural ponytail. More noticeable was the absence of her typical confidence, which was replaced with obvious uneasiness. "Thank you for coming," she said hesitantly, after we ordered coffee. "I've been trying to figure out what to say, how to explain, but there's no explanation that makes what I did okay." "No, there isn't," I said, without attacking or saving her. "The financial stuff, taking your money all these years, was wrong," she said afterwards. "But even worse was how I treated you and the kids, looking down on you, acting superior when all along you were the one keeping me afloat." Her voice crackled. "I was so ashamed of who I really was that I created this whole fake persona, and eventually I started believing it myself." "Why?" I said simply. "We came from the same family, Victoria. Mom and Dad gave us the same values, the same love. When did money and status become everything to you?" She stared at her coffee. "I don't know exactly. Maybe in middle school, when the popular girls made fun of my thrift store clothes, or in high school, when I wasn't invited to parties at the lake house because I wasn't their kind. I decided I would become their kind. Whatever it took. For the first time I realized how differently we had experienced our childhoods. How the moments I brushed aside had harmed Victoria's self-esteem. "We are selling the mansion," Alexander added. "Moving to something within our actual means. Victoria's looking for work too," he told me. "I'm starting at a design firm next month," she stated. "Entry-level position, but it's something I actually know how to do, and we're both in financial counseling, learning to live on a budget for the first time." As our conversation progressed, I maintained firm boundaries while allowing for potential reconciliation. This was not an instant repair. Trust, once broken, takes years to repair, but it was a start. Over the next few months, our relationship began to change gradually. Victoria made monthly payments toward what she now recognized as a debt, not gifts. More importantly, she expressed genuine interest in my life and the children's activities by attending Lucas's school play and Sophie's math competition, without making any derogatory remarks about public education. Sophie's 10th birthday was celebrated with a modest backyard cookout, 5 months after the Christmas confrontation. Victoria and Alexander arrived with thoughtful, age-appropriate gifts, but without the expensive labels and status symbols that had previously marked their presence. When Sophie showed Victoria her scientific project, a working model of the solar system, my sister responded with genuine interest rather than disdain. "You know," Isabel said as we watched them connect. "I never thought I'd say this, but your sister actually seems like a real person now." "She's trying," I admitted. "We all are." The most dramatic changes, however, occurred not in Victoria, but in myself and my children. Without the financial pressure of supporting my sister, I was able to cut back on overtime hours and spend more quality time with Sophie and Lucas. We had our first proper vacation that summer, a week at a lakeside cabin where we swam, hiked, and reconnected without the constant pressure of financial stress. Sophie and Lucas took this lesson to heart after witnessing their mother finally stand up for herself and them. Sophie became more forceful at school, firmly criticizing an instructor who attempted to take credit for her original study. Lucas stood up to a playground bully with calm dignity, effectively diffusing the situation. "You taught us it's okay to say no to people who don't treat us right, even if they're family," Sophie said to me one evening as I tucked her in. "That's important, isn't it?" I agreed. "It's one of the most important lessons there is. Loving someone doesn't mean letting them hurt you." A year after that terrible Christmas, we regrouped for the holidays, not in a mansion with professional servers and social climbers, but in Alexander and Victoria's new humble house. The decorations were basic, the food was handmade, and the ambiance was truly welcoming. Victoria, now working full-time and contributing equally to her household, had discovered genuine confidence, which her prior facade had just copied. As we sat around their table, I realized that the traumatic revelation at last year's Christmas dinner had ended up being a gift for all of us. It had relieved me of the responsibility of releasing Victoria from the prison of deception and the children from the subliminal message that riches defined value. "I'd like to propose a toast," Alexander said, raising his glass. "To family. Not perfect, but real. And to new beginnings." "To new beginnings," we repeated, glasses clinking in the candlelight. That night, while driving home with tired children in the back seat, I mused on how much our lives had changed in a single year. By standing up for myself and my children and refusing to repeat a negative cycle, I not only improved our financial situation but also demonstrated the self-esteem I wanted my children to grow. True worth, I had discovered, is not judged by designer labels or social approval. It is found in sincerity, healthy boundaries, and the bravery to live according to your principles, even if it means disrupting comfortable patterns. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is to stop tolerating unhealthy behavior and insist on the truth, no matter how unpleasant it is. Sophie stirred in the back seat as we pulled into our driveway. "Mom, are you glad about what happened last Christmas, even though it was hard?" I thought about her question carefully. "Yes, sweetheart. I am. Sometimes the hardest moments lead to the most important changes." "I think Aunt Victoria is happier now," Lucas remarked sleepily. "She laughs for real, not the fake laugh she used to do." I smiled as I reflected on their perceptiveness. "I think you're right. Sometimes people get lost trying to be something they're not. Finding your way back to who you really are is the greatest gift of all." When I refused to be my sister's servant, my mom threw a plate at me. That night I walked out for good. Now they're begging me to return. I don't normally post, but I thought I'd relate my experience because it still seems insane to me. I was the one who kept everything together at home, while Isabella was pampered like queen. I put up with it for years, but things got worse in unexpected ways. Let's just say I stopped playing the servant role, and what occurred next turned everything upside down. So I'm 24 now. But at the time I was 22. So, in order to understand how all of this happened, I had to go back a little bit. My family. Imagine a sitcom with no laugh track, only ranting, guilt trips, and me running around like the household's unpaid intern. That was essentially my childhood. I have one sister. She is 20 years old. 2 years younger than me. And let me tell you, she was raised as if she were the universe's crown gem. I'm spoiled to the bone. If she sneezed, Claudia would reach for Kleenex. Victor pretended it was cute. And I'd be the one tasked with throwing away the Kleenex. Meanwhile, I could get all A's or win a tournament. And the reaction would be, "That is nice. Now, take out the trash." I've always been the natural handyman. Lawn mowing me. I'm hauling groceries. Heavy furniture moves me. I drove little Princess to her friend's house because she didn't want to walk. Always me. The weird part is that I wasn't merely expected to do it. It seemed like it was my life's purpose. Isabella could literally stand next to me, watching me sweat while hauling 3 bags of mulch, and cheer like she was the supervisor. Claudia ate it up. She's the type who sees me lugging 12 grocery bags at once and cries, "Be careful. Don't drop the eggs. Your sister dislikes scrambled eggs." Victor, forget him. He was always the quiet sort, doing whatever it took to keep the peace. Peace of course meant injuring my back while Isabella sat on the couch scrolling. It wasn't only the tasks though, even at school partiality was so blatant that it was humiliating. When I received good scores, Victor scarcely looked up from his paper. Claudia would remark, "That's understandable. You're smart." Translation: nobody cares. But Isabella only got a D in math, and you'd think she cured cancer. Ice cream excursion, Facebook updates, and hugs in the living room. "We're very proud of you, honey. You're doing your best." She didn't always bring her assignments home. The toughest part was not even what I had to do. It was the way they complimented her on doing nothing. For example, she once vacuumed 1/3 of the living room and left the cord tangled everywhere. Claudia walked in like, "Oh, look how responsible she is helping the house." Meanwhile, I was sweating outdoors, mending a burst sprinkler line since Victor said, "You have strong arms. Handle it." No thank you, no appreciation, I just assumed I'd do it. By the time I was 20, I felt like a live-in worker. I worked part-time at a hardware store while also attending school. But when I went home, I found a list of duties waiting for me. Isabella was too stressed to help. What is the source of your stress? Posting selfies on Instagram. The car stuff was another level. I gathered money and purchased my first beater, a 2003 Peugeot. I paid for it using my own money. Within 3 weeks, Isabella was demanding rides everywhere. Whether I had plans or employment, she would reply, "You're my brother. You are supposed to drive me." Of course, if I refused, she would cry to Claudia, "Begin the talk. Why are you so selfish? She's your sister. Family helps family." It's funny because no one ever asked her to help me. And Victor, he was simply invisible. He would only intervene if things got heated. Even then he took Claudia's side. "Just do it, son. It's not worth the fight." Classic. He acted as if keeping Isabella pleased was a national security job and I was the soldier sent to carry it out. Looking back, it felt like I was a supporting character in a play, with Isabella as the star. Every scene swirled around her. All of the applause went to her. My duty was to raise props, clean the stage, and then disappear while she received all of the attention. By the time I got to college, I figured I'd finally break out of it. I had scholarships lined up and a decent chance of establishing anything. But the family found a way to entice me back in every break and vacation. It created a chip on my shoulder. As if I wasn't just bringing their groceries. I was carrying the entire circus. And if I did speak out, I was resentful. That was Claudia's favorite term. "We have given you everything. How dare you talk back? You assigned me duties. There are endless duties. And a front row seat for Isabella's parade." So, growing up, I quickly realized that I wasn't their son. I was their mule. And she was more than simply the golden child. She was impenetrable. Claudia would defend her in any situation. Victor would remain mute, leaving me to take the blame. But here's the thing. You can only push someone so far before they begin pushing back. And at 22, I was no longer the kid who shut up and drove Isabella to the mall. I had learned to play smarter. I wasn't just a mule anymore. I was the mule with a plan. Growing raised in a house where you are required to bend down at all times, teaches you to anticipate moves. I knew Isabella was going to pull a stunt eventually. She always did, and I knew Claudia would back her up without hesitation, while Victor sat there pretending nothing was happening. So it didn't surprise me that everything went wrong during supper. What surprised me was how far they went. There were only 4 of us that night. No visitors, no neighbors, just family. Claudia prepared one of her signature buffets: pasta, salad, and garlic bread. I sat down, preparing myself for the spectacle. Isabella sat in her chair across from me, swiping through her phone like the queen she imagined she was. Victor mumbled something about hotel reservations. Claudia was worrying over napkins as if the world relied on their being folded properly. Dinner begins, and for 7 lovely minutes, everything is normal. Chewing, little chat, and silverware clinking. Then it happens. Isabella dropped her fork. Not in a big fashion, just a slight slip, and it falls next to her chair. She doesn't blink or bow down. She merely stares at me and says, "Pick that up." I laugh out. Not a nervous laugh, nor a courteous chuckle. I burst out laughing because I believe she was joking. But, nah. Her expression was dead serious. She even cocked her chin upwards like a movie villain. I said, "Pick it up." Claudia's head sprang up. "You overheard your sister. Don't be tough." I reclined back in my chair, fork in hand, spaghetti almost in my mouth. She has 2 hands. Gravity affects her in the same way that it affects me. If she dropped it, she can retrieve it. Claudia responded as if I had cursed out the Pope. She slams her hand upon the table. "Do not start tonight. Just do it." I point to the fork on the floor. It is right there. It's not like it dropped into a sewer grate. She is not impaired. She can bend over and grab it herself. Victor clears his throat as if he is about to speak, but he does not say anything. He just gives me that disappointed dad expression, which he saves exclusively for me. Isabella smirks with that smug little twist of her lip that she's perfected since middle school. Wow, do you really believe you're too good to help your family? Servants should understand their responsibilities. That word servant triggered something in me. Not wrath or despair, just a cold switch flipped because she meant it. She was not joking. She wasn't teasing. That's exactly how she saw me. Not her brother, but her servant. I set down my fork on my plate. The clink resonated, making the entire table stiff. "I'm not your servant," I said. I spoke in a calm, bland tone that made it plain I wasn't lying. Claudia exclaims louder now. "Please stop embarrassing us. Do you realize how ungrateful you sound? Your sister has had a long day. The least you can do is assist her." I glance across the table at Isabella, who is sitting back in her chair, arms folded like if she is watching a show. A long day spent doing what? Taking selfies? Scrolling over Instagram? Yeah, sounds exhausting. Claudia snapped. She grabbed the nearest object, her plate, and threw it at me. No warning, no hesitancy, simply full-fledged fury mode. The plate smashed against my cheek, and for a split second, I felt no pain, only shock. Lettuce and vinaigrette went everywhere. The sting was acute and burning, and I could feel blood streaming down the side of my face. I stood up, hand on my cheek, staring at her. Claudia was standing now, chest thumping and eyes flaming as if I had just committed treason. Victor finally pushed his chair back, but he did not approach me, just sat there, frozen. Isabella did not even flinch, she just leaned closer, smirking and said, "I told you. Servants don't talk back." I did not yell, cuss, or give them any gratification. I just turned and left the dining room. The sound of my chair scraping across the tile was the only response I gave them. Upstairs, I locked my door and finally breathed. My cheek throbbed, and blood mixed with vinaigrette. I took my phone, opened the camera and began taking photos. The 2 cuts, the swelling, and the pile of food remaining on my shirt. Every click reassured me. Proof. That's all I needed. No screaming matches, no needless arguments, just cold, indisputable evidence. And while I sat there, rubbing a towel against my face, I knew something. This wasn't only about a fork on the ground. This was years of being viewed as a helper. Years spent being invisible until someone needed anything. Tonight was not a random event. It was the outcome of every time I allowed them to treat me as a servant. But those days were numbered, as the mule with a plan had just gathered his first piece of proof. After dinner, things became strange in the house. Claudia pretended nothing had happened, as if she hadn't thrown a plate at my face like she was trying out for the MLB. Victor remained glued to his laptop, as if his resort emails were life or death. Isabella just went around with that sneer, as if she had finally put me in my place. But, here's the deal. You can't get away from the idea of freedom once you've tasted it. I was not going to sit back and let them reset everything like it was any other Tuesday, so I started being more aware, gathering evidence, keeping my lips shut when necessary, and refining my responses. A few days later, I was outside in the driveway, working on my car. Hood up, grease on my hands, sun beating down. One of those calm afternoons when you truly feel at peace. That is, until she shows up. Isabella walked out as if she owned the property. She walked smugly, phone in hand, as if she were about to give a regal order. She leaned against the car next to me and said, "You know, whatever you believe, you'll always be my little servant. That is all you are." I washed my hands with a rag and looked at her. A part of me wanted to laugh. Another part of me wanted to tell her to shove it. Instead, I leaned against the car, smirked at her and muttered, "Funny. I don't recall staff keeping this mansion from falling apart. Without me, the entire circus falls." Her grin faded for a half second. Then she leaned in closer, as if she were preparing for a battle. "Don't speak back. Everyone knows you're just bitter because Claudia and Victor adore me more." I tilted my head. "Yes, congratulations. You are the MVP of doing nothing. You've earned an impressive title there." And that's when Mom performed her hallmark maneuver, which usually worked when we were younger. She took a step back, flung her phone to the ground for dramatic effect, and screamed at the top of her voice. "He hit me. He shoved me," and I froze. Not because I felt bad, but because I knew what was coming. Claudia and Victor stormed out of the home, as if they had been waiting backstage for their cue. Claudia's eyes widened as she saw her beloved daughter fake cry. Victor clenched his jaw, as if he were preparing to deliver a courtroom speech. Claudia dashed up to Isabella, hugging her as if she had just survived a battle. "What have you done to her?" she snapped at me. "How could you place your hands on your sister?" I opened my mouth to explain, but Victor heaped on. "You are a monster, son. She's your sister, and you dare to hurt her? What is wrong with you?" I just stood there, hands smeared in oil, staring at them as if I were in some bizarre prank show. I had not touched her, not even near. However, in their view, her word was law. And that's when salvation came in. Mr. Henrik Dahl, our neighbor, walked up the walkway with his dog. He's an older retired Navy guy with a no-nonsense attitude. He saw it all from across the street. He came to a halt at the edge of our driveway, pulled his cap down and stated, "That boy did not touch her. I watched the whole darn thing. She is lying through her teeth." There was silence. Complete silence. Claudia's jaw literally fell. Victor began to murmur something about misunderstanding, but Mr. Dahl interrupted him. "Don't dare. I have been watching this garbage for years. You folks treat him like dirt, yet that female walks about like she owns the world. You should be ashamed." Isabella's phony tears ended abruptly. She merely stood there, caught red-handed, eyes flashing as if she may melt into the pavement. Claudia muttered something about family issues. Mr. Dahl shook his head. "No. This is not family. It's bullying, and everyone here notices it." Then he walked away, leaving the bomb he had dropped hanging in the air. I swear I almost laughed out loud. For the first time in years, someone outside the house spoke it aloud. And my parents had no response. They just stood there, like someone had pulled the rug out from under them. That night, I sat in my room, still contemplating it. Mr. Henrik Dahl did not simply call them out. He validated me, proved I wasn't insane, that it wasn't all in my head. Outsiders noticed it too. While sorting through some old boxes in my closet, I discovered something else that sparked a fire within me. Letters from my late grandfather, Victor's father. I'd seen them before, but never read them carefully. This time I did, and they landed hard. One line remained with me. "Don't let anyone turn you into a mule, son. Man creates his own life. Carrying everyone else will just break you down." I must have read that statement a dozen times, because that was just what I had been doing. Carrying them. Their emotions, tasks, and junk. And for what? Nothing. That's when the plan began to solidify in my mind. I wasn't simply daydreaming about leaving anymore. I was going to try it for real. I started tiny. I opened a secret bank account and saved whatever money I could scrounge together from side jobs. I sneaked into Victor's office at night to copy my birth certificate and social security card. Every small step felt like breaking a chain. And I did not stop there. I contacted Mr. Matteo Rossi, a family friend I'd always looked up to, a retired guy who was stern but fair, who gave counsel without sugarcoating. I told him what was going on, and rather than dismissing me, he responded, "It's about time you cut loose. You have brains, kid. Use them. Don't let them guilt you into wasting your 20s. That stung me the most, because he was correct. I was no longer merely planning. I was nearly halfway out the door. The difference was that they didn't realize it yet. To them, I was still the obedient son, the built-in handyman who did whatever was necessary. So I wore the mask, fixed the leaky faucet, carried the heavy groceries, nodded when Claudia gave instructions, and laughed when Isabella tried her little power plays. On the outside, it appeared that I was still their mule. On the inside, every errand meant another day closer to my departure. However, one of the drawbacks of playing the game is that the opposite side may occasionally sniff about. And Isabella was always the curious sort, snooping through your backpack because she was bored. I should have expected it. One afternoon, I was shaving upstairs in the bathroom when I heard her door bang open, followed by mine. My stomach constricted. She was inside my room. I walked out and caught the tail end of it as she rifled through my belongings. My duffel bag, the decoy one, was half unzipped on the floor. I had planted it many weeks ago, complete with exercise clothing, old sneakers and printed resumes for nearby jobs. Everything is a forgery, designed to be detected. A trap. And she ate the bait like a fish. Her eyes brightened up when she spotted the papers. "Oh my God. Claudia." "Victor, come here." I leaned against the door frame, towel over my shoulder, and seemed to be bored. "Have you found anything you like?" Claudia rushed in, drying her hands with a dish towel. Victor followed with a frown. Isabella pushed the papers at them. "Look, he's preparing to depart. He has 2 suitcases packed." Claudia's face contorted as if she had discovered a criminal. "Is this true? Are you snooping around?" I shrugged. "What? That's Jim stuff." I thought I'd finally stopped skipping leg day. Victor grabbed the resumes and scanned them like they were FBI files. These are job applications. Yeah, I answered casually. For local locations. I figured I would toss some out there. You can't exactly live here forever, right? That line irritated Claudia, I could see it. She began pacing, muttering about loyalty and familial obligation. Isabella was practically glowing, waiting for me to get nailed, but I just leaned back, arms folded, and watched them spiral. I finally said, "Relax. It's called planning. You want me to freeload indefinitely? You complain when I do not contribute. You criticize when I try to give elsewhere. Make up your mind." Victor looked at me, then at the bag, and finally back at me. He exhaled. The classic. "I do not want to deal with this transfer." Okay. But no secrets. If you're looking for work, please notify us, understand? Crystal clear, I responded, concealing a smirk. They left the room, Isabella trailing behind, still upset that her big discovery had failed. As soon as the door closed, I zipped up the duffel, tossed it into the corner, and sat on my bed. Inside, I was grinning. They had no idea that the original paperwork, bank information, copied IDs, and bus timetable to the city were hidden in a shoebox under the floorboard. That was the moment I realized I had them. They thought they had caught me. They believed they were in control. But I was running two games at once. They could see one, but not the other. Nonetheless, the scare reminded me that I was walking a fine line. If they slipped, they would tighten their grip even more. So I tightened everything. I began to treat every move as if it were a game of chess. The truth is, I know some people reading this will think, "You're 22. Why not just leave already?" And theoretically, I could have walked out the front door at that moment, but going broke with no paperwork, backup, or job lined up would have played right into their hands, and I had no one to help. I was on my own. So they'd make it seem like I was unstable, or worse, I'd crawl back when things got bad. And it was not going to happen. I didn't merely plan to depart. I planned to leave so clean that they'd never be able to bring me back. Every money I saved, every document I copied, and every step of this escape strategy was designed to sever all of their strings at once. When Claudia asked me to run errands, I volunteered, which provided me an excuse to go to the library, send out actual applications, and check emails on public computers. When Victor requested me to move boxes to the attic, I did so, then utilized the opportunity to hide extra cash where no one would look. When Isabella teased me for still living at home, I smiled since I knew I wouldn't be there long. But the tension was rising. Every dinner seemed like a challenge. Claudia's glances became sharper, as if she was waiting to catch me lying. Isabella began throwing little jabs at me, wanting to upset me so she could retreat and play the victim again. Despite the stillness, my heart would still race. Because if they ever discovered the real stash, the true plan, it would be over. They'd lock me down tighter than ever. The danger was not losing. The threat was identified too quickly. That made every day feel like walking a tightrope. But I wasn't afraid. I was as sharp as I had ever been. One night, while everyone was sleeping, I took out my notebook and began listing steps. Bus to downtown. Train tickets to Seattle. Please contact Mr. Rossi to confirm the job lead. Only bring what you really need. 2 duffel bags were hidden under my car's seat the night before. Every move was meticulously planned. I sat back and looked over the list, my cheek still slightly wounded from the plate. I smiled. They assumed I was confined. They believed they still owned me. But they were mistaken, since the mule with a plan was almost halfway gone. And this time, there was no turning him back. I knew it. But the trouble with crazy individuals is that they do not give up easily. They sense you pull away, and instead of backing away, they dig in deeper, grabbing at whatever they can grip. That is what my family did. It was after dinner, late enough that the house was silent save for the hum of the ceiling fan. I had just finished clearing my plate when Claudia's voice pierced through the air. Family meeting now. The tone was not optional. She used the same one when she found Isabella stealing beer at the age of 17, and when I forgot to maintain the lawn for a week. I sat back down at the table, and Victor and Isabella were already there, waiting as if it were a trial. Claudia stood at the head, as if she were the judge, jury, and executioner all in one. I did not even flinch. I reclined back in my chair, arms crossed, ready for the performance. Claudia began first. Your attitude has been unacceptable. You've been distant, belligerent, and downright ungrateful. After everything we've done for you, This is how you thank us. I tilted my head. Given to me, or taken from me? Her eyes narrowed. Victor cleared his throat. This family only works when everyone understands their roles. You're upsetting the balance. Translation, I replied, smirking. You mean when I act like the unpaid butler and she... I jerked my head at Isabella. Acts like royalty. Isabella gasped, as if I had spit on the Holy Grail. You are pathetic. You will always be the servant. That is your place. I did not raise my voice. Did not need to. I simply reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and slid it across the table. The screen popped up with a photo of my cheek. 2 plate incisions, swelling, and blood. Funny, I responded gently. Since where I come from, maids are rarely harmed for refusing to pick up something. That isn't discipline. That's abuse. The room fell silent for a moment. Claudia's face drained and then turned red. Victor's jaw stiffened. Isabella's smirk appeared for the first time in months. Delete that, Claudia said, her voice loud. You are distorting things. You pushed me first. You provoked me. I laughed sharply and quickly. Yes, certainly. Everyone can see I triggered a flying plate with my face. This is when Victor lost his cool. He grabbed his glass of water, slammed it down, and yelled, "Enough." Then, in one dumb split second, he tossed the glass directly at me. Time slowed. I noticed it spinning, with fluids trailing behind like a slow-motion commercial. It smashed against the table's edge, spraying pieces everywhere. A few nicked my arm and stung. But here's the kicker. Some rebounded back upon them. Victor's hand was riddled with tiny cuts, a piece of Isabella's naked leg. And the masters of the mansion appeared less like kings and queens and more like clowns suffering from their own mess. I rose up slowly, wiping shards from my clothing. My voice came out calmly. There is no movement. You've just proven my argument. You're not just toxic, you're dangerous. Claudia scrambled, hands flailing. There was an accident. He didn't mean... I held up my phone, already photographing the shards, cuts, and mess. It doesn't matter. This isn't just a family drama anymore. It's evidence, Isabella said quietly for a change. There was no grin or swift insult, only startled eyes as they realized the game had changed. I took my bag from beneath the chair, slung it over my shoulder, and stared each of them dead in the eye. You thought you could keep me trapped here forever, but now you've given me every reason to make it official. Claudia's voice was raspy. What do you mean? I said, stepping toward the door. I'm going to file charges. Do you think I'll allow you keep hurling things at me until one day it becomes worse? Nah. This is over now. Victor pushed forward as if he wanted to stop me, but a glance at the phone in my hand stopped him mid-step. He knew. They all knew. The power dynamic had flipped. I strolled out of the room as if I owned it. Their voices lingered behind me, a combination of panic, fury, and phony pleading. But I didn't stop because I recognized the plan wasn't only to leave silently. It was about destroying the bridge behind me so that they could never bring me back. Nothing lights a bridge faster than the truth, backed up by cold, indisputable proof. That night I did not sleep. Couldn't. However, my thoughts was not racing in panic. It was steady and clear, as if someone had finally removed the fog from a windshield. Every bruise, fragment, and photo on my phone served as more than just proof. It was fuel. By morning, I had my duffel in the trunk, my documentation in a folder, and my departure planned out to the minute. I didn't say goodbye or leave a note. I strolled out the door with the same calm I'd maintained since the glass cracked. First stop. The police station. Walking in with a bandaged cheek and fresh cuts on my arm made me stand out quickly. I asked for an officer, placed my phone on the desk, and let the pictures speak for themselves. The cop glanced through the photos, his brow furrowing with each swipe, the plate cut, bruises, and broken glass littering the dining room floor. You're saying both events included your parents? He asked. Yep. Claudia threw the plate first, and Victor tossed the glass second. I have timestamps, 2 neighbors who witnessed sections of it, and a phone full of evidence. Tell me what that looks like. He didn't debate or belittle it. He simply nodded and started typing. Looks like assault to me. Hearing it labeled out loud seemed like a weight was lifted off my shoulders. It was not a family drama. It was not discipline. It was an assault. Period. They submitted the report, gave me copies, and promised to follow up with Mr. Henrik Dahl regarding his witness statement. And just like that, the narrative I'd been stuck in for years flipped. It did not happen overnight. A few weeks later, the charges were officially filed. And that's when the dominoes fell. By the afternoon I was at Mr. Rossi's house, the mentor I had trusted. He had left a spare room free for me and said I may stay as long as I needed. We sat at his kitchen table and I sipped coffee, and he gave me the approving nod that only old men with military haircuts can give. "I told you it had come to this," he said. "Don't waste this opportunity. Build your own life." So I did. I stayed at Mr. Rossi's for a while, assisting around the house while arranging the job offer. 3 weeks later, I packed my duffel, took the bus to the station, and purchased an Amtrak ticket to Seattle. Watching the miles pass by out the window, I realized I wasn't just leaving a house, I was leaving the entire cage behind. Within 3 weeks I obtained a job offer from one of the companies I'd been applying to. The moment I walked out of that house, college was paused. I didn't have enough time to attend classes while also reconstructing my life. So work came first. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. My paycheck. My independence. No more being instructed when to take out the garbage or who to serve. Seattle became home base. First a friend's couch, then a cramped studio with creaky floors and a view of a brick wall. But here was my brick wall. I cooked my own food, had my own schedule, and lived by my own rules. Every time I dropped a fork on the floor and bent down to pick it up, I giggled. Stupid, yet symbolic. My fork, my hand, my preference. Meanwhile, back home, the consequences were severe. Claudia and Victor were surprised that the cops did not brush it under the rug. They followed through. Claudia and Victor face assault accusations. Nothing felony level at first, but enough to tarnish their records and have their neighbors talking, and gossip spreads faster than hurricanes in that neighborhood. Claudia suddenly ceased to be the queen of block parties. She was the mom who flung a dish at her son. Invitations ceased up. Her friends, to whom she used to gloat, began to avoid her. Victor did not escape either. The resort industry lives on reputation. Word spread that he was having family troubles. And just like that, his managers stopped trusting him with major accounts. The man who formerly strode through hotel lobbies was now reduced to managing regional bookings, imprisoned in a cubicle with peeling wallpaper. His pride, which he treasured the most, was crushed. Isabella has misplaced her beloved weapon. After Henrik Dahl vouched for me and the cops accepted my side, her word was meaningless. People stopped trusting her stories. Without me to fetch and carry, she was forced to live like the rest of us. Work, bend, and sweat. According to what I've heard, she ended up serving lattes at a coffee shop and posting sad Instagram captions about grinding. Reality check, served boiling hot. I didn't gloat publicly, but internally, watching them crumble from a distance was the most satisfying feeling I'd ever had. Not because I want vengeance for its own sake, but because the world finally recognized them for who they truly were. And I wasn't their mule anymore. I was not their scapegoat or servant. I was just a guy, finally free and living. Every paycheck I received, every late-night brainstorming session at work, and every calm evening in my apartment proved I had made it out. They could bleed, whine, and crumble all they wanted inside that mansion. That wasn't my burden to bear anymore. The finest thing was knowing I created it smartly. I did not just run away. I designed an escape so tight and calculated that they couldn't use it against me. I have evidence in my pocket, a job lined up, and my life is waiting. And now that I look back, I don't see a kid confined. I see the guy who played the long game, loaded the deck, and walked away with what they said I'd never have. Control. And while I was establishing something real in Seattle, their entire enterprise back home began to collapse from every perspective. It wasn't even me pulling the cords, they were pulling themselves apart. Mr. Rossi was the first to provide me the updates. He informed me he had run into Victor at the hardware shop. He said the man resembled a ghost. Claudia and Victor fought every day. Claudia yelled that Victor had let me go away. Victor snapped back, claiming Claudia was the one who transformed the house into a circus. Isabella was yelling at both of them, stating they had ruined her life because she now had to do everything on her own. The lovely little familial unit that previously stood against me was now eating each other up. The weird thing was that I wasn't even angry anymore, just detached, as if I'd left a cage of wild animals and was watching them battle from the outside. Then the financial issues struck. Without me carrying all of the weight, mending things, paying for minor crises, and saving them time and money on every duty, their finances began to deteriorate. Victor's compensation was reduced due to his demotion at work. Claudia's small social gatherings dwindled, leaving no side benefits. Bills heaped, credit cards maxed out. Word spread that the house was under pre-foreclosure. Henrik Dahl told me he saw the note on the front door one morning. There is no hiding it, it is as obvious as day. Victor had to sell his automobile. Claudia pawned jewelry that she used to wear like it was her crown. When people saw them shopping at inexpensive stores, they looked away as if they didn't recognize them. People who relied on bragging rights couldn't recover from such a setback. Then came the trivial stuff, which made me chuckle the most. Isabella attempted to move out on her own, gloating publicly that she was finally independent. She barely lasted 4 months before going back home because rent was eating her alive. Claudia sent me an email attempting to guilt-trip me. "Your sister is crying herself to sleep, and it's your fault." I read it twice, laughed, and erased. For once, her tears were not my fault. The scar on my cheek has faded to a faint line. I never covered it up. If someone asked, I'd just shrug and say, "Family stuff." Because the truth was not in the scar itself. The truth was that I had walked away from those who had given it to me and never looked back. 5 years later, I received 2 last emails. There's no subject line. Just desperation seeping into the text. Claudia stated that they were breaking apart, with expenses crushing them. Victor is stuck at a dead-end job, while Isabella drifts. "You're doing so well. Please help us," she wrote. I sat there reading it and felt nothing, not angry or smug. I pressed delete without hesitation, and I knew I had truly won. Not because their lives fell apart, but because I stopped caring. So, if you're stuck in a family that treats you like a mule, hear this. You don't owe them your entire life simply because you have blood. Play the long game. Document everything. Save the proof. Build your exit in silence. And when the day arrives, walk away cold. Do not wait for their apologies. Do not beg for their blessing. Leave so clean that they will never be able to draw you back. Because throwing their comments back in their face isn't the best way to exact revenge. The best form of vengeance is living a life so much beyond their means that they are forced to choke on the reality. The servant was the only person who figured it out.